We're going to reconvene the City Council regular meeting Wednesday, October 19, 2016. All council people are present and accounted for. Is there anything to report from the closed session?
No, the City Council discussed the matter listed on the agenda relating to real property negotiations, and there's no reportable action.
Great. We will then now begin with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Berwin Hanna.
Please begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll now have Pastor Sam come forward. It's actually Sam Tuhalakamaka. I bet I murdered that, huh? Yeah, that's what I said.
Our Heavenly Father, and the Lord of glory, the King of kings, of heaven and earth. Lord, I pray right now, heal all the members of the council. Give them a wisdom to lead this city, strengthen, they give us instruction. A wisdom is from above. Lord, I pray right now for their duty, everything they do in strength, and the power of the Holy Spirit moving on this place. Lord, I pray right now for everything they do it for your glory. In faithful, and everything they do and love each other in unity. They become the city of this city to be a unity in love, and everything they do it in love each other, love to the public, and love for the need of the people. I pray for the need and the want of the people to be available and opportunity to build up this city. Lord, I pray right now for your protection for the council, for all the members and all the people that work together, for the protection from above. I pray right now because we believe in a faithful God, like you do it from the history of the Bible. You protect your people at night and day. I pray right now, Lord, give everything they do in this city to build up in everything, in the strength and the power and a grateful city, this country. I pray for the peace of the nation. Include the city of this country right here. We stand together, the peaceful, and become not the enemies coming to steal and kill and destroy the life. But I pray right now for the peace to become strength in heart of everyone. Lord, I pray right now the blessing, Lord, come upon for the mighty hand of God. I pray right now to bless everybody, even the public and the people come their need. We're coming and stand together on this property, Lord. Bless them, bless their children, bless the job, bless everything, Lord. I pray for blessing everybody right now. And we give the glory and honor to you, everything we do. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Sam.
Amen.
Thank you to the Beacon Hill Assembly of God for so supporting our council meetings. Thank you, sir. Moving on to recognitions. Norco Sheriff's Deputy Randy Pistoyan. I'm sorry, Randy Deputy Pistoyan. I did not mean to be disrespectful. California High Patrol Officer Eric Sullivan and Norco resident Ed Dixon. Come aboard, fellas. We're going to talk a little bit about you. We're going to start with Berwin Hanna. He's going to tell the first part of the story, then we're going to shift over to Eric.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to let Eric go ahead and do that. He's got the written story on this. That way we'll get it right.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of City Council, city staff, and residents. On Wednesday, August 17th, 2016, during the morning hours, a horse trainer was walking a horse on 6th Street in the city of Norco. The horse was suddenly spooked by construction traffic, got loose, and fled west on 6th Street. When the horse reached the I-15 freeway, it fled onto the freeway and ran southbound into the oncoming northbound traffic. Fortunately, Norco Deputy Randy Pistoyan was nearby, advised of the circumstances by a passerby, and reacted quickly to avert a serious traffic collision on the freeway. Deputy Pistoyan worked with California Highway Patrol Officer Eric Sullivan to provide a traffic brake and stopped traffic near where the horse was located on the freeway. Deputy Pistoyan and our very own resident, Mr. Ed Dixon, the horse trainer, along with several passing motorists, were able to approach the horse and contain it before the horse became involved in a traffic collision. The horse was subsequently walked off the freeway by the horse trainer and reunited with its owner. Fortunately, the horse was not injured, nor anyone else. So with that, I would like to commend Deputy Randy Pistoyan, CHP Officer Eric Sullivan, and our very own resident, Mr. Ed Dixon. Can you gentlemen come up to the podium, please?
More coming from this gentleman. Yep, I got it.
Ed, this is for you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Officer Sullivan. And Deputy Randy Pistoyan. Something I want to add about Officer Sullivan here. About a year and a half ago, my wife Linda was involved in a very, very bad traffic collision. Stopped for approximately an hour and a half. Officer Sullivan stood by her side and me as well.
Captain, can we get you up there?
If I could just say thank you to the city council and all the people. I always wanted to be a cowboy, and I used to watch a Lone Ranger take off of this runaway horse, and I was hoping there'd be a girl in the saddle, but there wasn't. One other thing, I learned to jump fences real quick. My instructor's Councilman Hanna on the NARC team, and he taught all of us one night how to jump a fence the legitimate way. And that's, I owe all that to you, Berwin. It pays to steal watermelons, don't it?
That's what I was going to say. Did you have a watermelon under your arm?
Oh, okay. One last thing from me. Officers, thank you so much for protecting us in Norco and Corona, Eastville. We really love having you guys. Highway Patrol, deputy sheriffs, police officers. We really appreciate everything you do. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. So now we're going to go to a proclamation, Red Ribbon Week. And I'd like this young lady in the back to come on. In fact, there's a whole bunch of them. All of you come on forward. You don't care about those people. It's these people that are important. So anyway, what this is Red Ribbon Week, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you, or you, whichever one you want. By the way, how come you're back there? on up here. You're part of the team. Anyway, I'd like one of you to explain what Red Ribbon Week is. Okay? I've been inspired, see?
Hi, my name is Robin. I work for the Corona Norco Unified School District, and we provide tobacco and drug education, anti-drug and tobacco education to all of the K through 12th graders in the district. So with Red Ribbon Week, we do a lot of we have a contest. We have a poster creative writing and media contest to help the students learn about the awareness and dangers of drug and alcohol. We have a family fun festival. We give out red ribbon wristbands to all of our students. We have some on the back if anybody would like to grab one. So we just have a good time and educate the students throughout the whole district. So, and we thank Norco for sharing in the proclamation of assisting Norco.
So these, in my opinion, these three ladies here are all heroes. Robin and myself, this time we all meet with them on a quarterly basis with Eric, Sergeant back there. We meet with the principal of Norco High School, and I have to give credit to Eric. Eric has really made the organization Unload really take off, as has the sergeant back there. Drug abuse is really out of control, and so I'm going to read the proclamation and maybe we'll bring some awareness. Whereas cities across America have been plagued by the numerous problems associated with alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use, and substance abuse is particularly damage to one of our most valuable resources, our children, and a contributing factor in the three leading causes of death for teenagers: accidents, homicides, and suicides. The red ribbon was chosen as a symbol commemorating the work of DEA Enrique Kiki Camarena, who was murdered in 1985 in the line of duty and has come to represent his belief that one person can make a difference. The Red Ribbon celebration was established by Congress in 1988 to promote this belief and encourage a drug-free lifestyle and involvement in drug prevention efforts. In 2015, and Robin, don't laugh, Red Ribbon Week theme, YOLO, be drug free. What YOLO is, what does it stand for again? You only live once. And showing my age. Promotes family and individual responsibilities for living healthy, drug-free lifestyles without illegal drugs or the illegal use of legal drugs. The Corona Norco Unified School District further commits its support and resources, as does the City of Norco, to ensure the success of Red Ribbon Week and year-round alcohol, tobacco, and other drug abuse prevention efforts. Now, therefore, I, Kevin Bash, on behalf of the Norco City Council, support Red Ribbon Week. 100%. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, let's get this guy in front here. And then it's got an opportunity to get a picture here. So moving on. See, Greg, when you're up here, you're going to be going up and down, up and down, up and down. We're going to move on to one of my favorite things that we do. Is every couple of council meetings we do business appreciation. Is the Bob's Big Boy representative here? I know who you are. Come on up. And I'm going to bring up Scott. He's going to present you with something. Maybe you explain.
This time.
Why don't you guys come on over here?
Okay.
So the audience.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay. Dr. Rosa.
Hi. Charlie.
Charlie. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm Scott DeRosa, and I'm currently the vice chair of EDAC, known as Economic Development and Advisory Committee for the City of Norco. And we go through and try to select businesses that have been beneficial to the city, where they've helped the city out with different functions, volunteer time, or etc. And been a strong contributor to the community as a whole. So tonight we're here to honor Bob's Big Boy for everything that they've done within the city. And let me go ahead and hand you the award, and I'm going to read what it says. Okay, so James and Charlie, the city of Norco hereby honors Bob's Big Boy for bringing a nostalgic, quintessential American brand to Norco and graciously adapting the iconic Bob statue to the community's western ambience. In addition to featuring the only Bob in the country wearing a cowboy hat, Norco's Bob's Big Boy hosts and contributes to many community events, which is greatly appreciated by the Norco community. Thank you so much for everything you do, and congratulations.
Well, thank you. We're proud to be here.
Thank you so much. It is our pleasure and privilege to be here, and we, as the community, we've been dedicate and contribute 100% into this great city, and we will be always here, and it's our honor. Thank you so much, and let me forward this one here to my general manager, Charlie.
Like James said, we are definitely proud to be in this city. The city is unique, like in any other city in America, and we're very proud to be here, and we plan on being here for a long time. I'd like to thank James for building the restaurant here in this great city. I'd like to thank our staff, in particular James Smallwood and Lori Smallwood, because they go above and beyond. And yeah, that's James. And I just really am so happy to be here, and I'm so appreciative of the community because they really support us as we support them. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I get ready? Bob's Big Boy Cheeseburger. So now, moving on to City Council business. City Council communications, reports on regional boards. Who would like to start? Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Last Thursday, I attended the Chino de Salter Authority Board of Directors meeting. And just to give you a little update on what we got going on there. With the CDA Phase 3 expansions, we have 10 projects completed, 5 projects in construction, and 1 upcoming project in design. And the one that's in design, or coming up in design, is going to be, once again, the bringing the water line through the Santa Ana River. If you recall, here a while ago, that they were microtunneling the water line under about approximately 20-25 feet under the riverbed, and the microtunneler got stuck on some object. So that's been abandoned. And then after that, we met the city, Councilman Hoffman, I think with Andy, and we made a proposal to Western Municipal that proposing to bring the water line hang it from the Hamner Bridge. That is no longer an acceptable option for them, so they've decided now they want to try horizontal boring under the river again. So that will be the design impact. I see Chad smiling at me. That see if it works. but I'm no longer having a betting pool on this deal. I'm out of it. So just a quick rundown on where we are on the summaries, that we have approximately $148 million in construction going on at the present time. So the last item I have on this, and this is just kind of an indication, and this is my opinion only, and take it this way, is the way these water boards work. And I did have discussions with our Public Works Director on it. We had one item that came up, and in the few years that I've been involved in construction, I've never seen this before, that when we do change orders, all contractors are entitled to overhead and profit. And this was an agenda item to increase the contractor's overhead for his home office, for his place of business. And it was $950,000 for time extension for their main office. And have never seen anything like this. I asked the questions, I made the argument that overhead would keep smiling, because I know you can't believe it either. The overhead should cover those costs. And the reply I got was that the project engineering team was so proud that the number was $950,000 that they had negotiated that change order amount down from $3.2 million. And so you wonder why water rates go up and things like this. So the good side of that is that on that board, Norco is not a participant in that cost. Those are only being borne by, hopefully, Europa, okay, that our Public Works Director represents. So we won't get hung out on the $950,000, but this is kind of what goes on every month, that it seems that they got a wheelbarrow full of money and they love to spend it. So, like I said, that's my opinion only, but we shouldn't have a cost impact. And then, Ted, do you want to talk about ad hoc committee? This last Monday and the previous Monday, Councilman Hoffman, myself, planning commissioners, Leonard, Jafarian, and staff, we've been meeting every Monday afternoon on revisiting our accessory building ordinance. And right now we're just still in the format portion of it, basically looking at our challenges and how we want to approach it. So that's all I have, Kevin.
Ted?
Well, I don't know if I had the privilege, but I sure had some fun going to Long Beach with Mayor Bash and Councilman Hannah and our city manager, Akuro. The Long Beach League of Cities had a lot of good things, a lot of contacts. Of course, they had their expo. And what's good is they have different seminars and different presentations that you can go to. Some of the ones that I went to was on, that I thought I could bring back as far as us, was they had a presentation on EDAC and the use of it, the Economic Development Advisory. I also attended a wastewater project funding. Found out that unless you're a special person, you're not going to get any of that money. And they also talked about the communications between planning commissions, the department, and city council. Something I think that it opened my eyes a little bit about how to properly communicate. We're not the only city that has problems in communicating what we want to hear to the planning department and to the planning commissions. Also the use of social media and how you use it and what not to do. And then, of course, the youth activity involvement, which I shared with City Clerk regarding the new activity council for that. But it was, I said, we met a lot of people, and it's good networking. Some of the main topic speakers I held my reservation on. We don't select them, but I can tell that a lot of the coastal cities and Bay Area probably selected the speakers for this event, if you all leave it at that. Also had with the CRC, we met with them on our meeting. Ms. Dixon was there with us. Essentially, they're just continuing on their accreditation program to make sure they pass next year all their testing, and so they can hold their accreditation. The one good note is they have been hiring outside of the state and hiring some union personnel to come in and help update and remodel some of the facilities in there to get them up to the proper code. And they also shared with us the amount of spending they're doing in the community, charitable funding, and some of the projects they're funding. So I naturally mentioned a few of our pet projects and things like that they should be looking at. For those of you who got to go to on the veterans, it was October 8th, the long range patrol, the Vietnam veterans that came out. Brian, your staff did an excellent job, as always. And those guys like us. They thought we have a beautiful facility up there at the Veterans Memorial. Mayor Bash did the opening and did a very good job. But again, these guys are really appreciated, and they thanked us for welcoming them home here in Norco and extending out really. So for all those you got a chance, these are people not just from Southern California. These people are from all over the United States, and they appreciate what they saw here and what we've done for our veterans. So if you saw them, thank you. That's it, Mayor.
Robin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first committee that I served on, or we met, was the Unload Committee. Met a couple of weeks ago. The big discussion on that committee obviously is Red Ribbon Week that's coming up. One thing that I would like my colleagues to note again is that on November 1st, they'll have contest judging for the Red Ribbon Week contest. There's arts and media and those types of things. And it's held right in here. So if any of our fellow council members or any city staff can make it over here for a little bit of time to help judge those, that'll be between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. on November the 1st. We also will have a recognition evening for those students that have won the contest. That'll be in the Learning Center South, which is the portables just to the south of the district office, and that'll be November 17th at 6:30. So I'll have another couple chances to remind you of that. And then the last one is the Family Fun Festival that the Red Ribbon Week Committee is putting on, and that'll be October 30th from noon to 4 at a park in Corona, and I'm sure the city highlights will have that information soon. I know we do have some student groups from Norco High School that'll be participating, and I know the Ag Department's taking some volunteers over to help with cleanup and tear down and those types of things. We also had a guest speaker come and talk to us about presentations that are aimed at helping students to make good choices, and they do assemblies and things like that. So that was also during that meeting. Just making appearances, I was able to go to senior breakfast again, which is always enjoyable. You can just go sit and relax and support a good cause and have a really cheap, good breakfast. And I was at homecoming at Norco High School with Councilman Hoffman the other night. We won the game by 1 point, thank goodness. And then lastly, I was able to attend the Youth Advisory Committee meeting on Tuesday. Super excited about that group. 9 young people that are basically like a commission of youth that will work to discuss what are some youth issues in this community and how they can make recommendations to the council of how we can get them involved in our local government. And they were able to select their president or their chair and their vice chair and their clerk, and they've decided on their own to meet twice a month. And so I'm looking forward to what they have to offer to our community. And that completes my report.
Berwin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'll start off with RCTC. This is probably one of the things you saw and you wondered about it, but you never asked about them. But the blue call boxes along the freeways. Started out in the early 90s with 1,100 boxes. And to pay for those boxes each month, there's $1 comes off of your vehicle registration fee that goes into paying for the maintenance on the boxes, which is about well, right now we're spending $311,000 a year for 681 boxes. We started out with 1,100 boxes, up to 88,000 calls in 1 year per year for a long time, and then the cell phones come out, and now 92% of the people in California have cell phones, so the use of the call boxes has gone way down. Like 2015-16 is down to 3,600 calls for the year, and they're old, expensive to maintain. Right now they're 2G, and Verizon is going to upgrade them to 3G to make them stronger, and we're going to reduce down from 681 boxes right now to 233. We'll go down from $311,000 maintenance this year to $106,000 maintenance in the future. But as long as the more cell phones it gets out, and they keep a pretty good record on these boxes, we'll be getting fewer of them each year as we go along. And while we're on the transportation thing, and I know Bonnie will probably talk about this in a minute, but Thursday night at NHA, there'll be an update on the 91 and the 15 freeways, and also Monday night at the town hall meeting, a representative from RCTC will be there to give an update on both freeways and how the 15 freeway construction, when it starts next spring, will affect Norco. And I don't think we'll be affected like Corona's been with the 91. Moving over to RTA, the buses, we've got 2 buses that are going to have to be taken out of service in January because they've reached their limit on the age of the fuel tanks on there, the natural gas fuel tanks. But with a grant, we're going to transfer those buses over to hybrid. And this will be an experiment. Eventually, if it works good, we'll probably go to hybrid with all of them. But these 2 buses, when they get them transferred over, and it won't take them but less than a week to do this, they're going to run on University Avenue from UCR to the downtown bus station and back. So that'll be an interesting to see how this turns out. Also, this Saturday at Hemet at the bus terminal down there is the bus rodeo. It's where the drivers all are in a contest on driving an obstacle course and seeing who the best one is, and then they let us commissioners go next. And I went down last Saturday and practiced. Don't laugh till you hear the results for next week, but pretty tricky. I've driven a motorhome, a long motorhome, quite a bit that was flat-nosed on the front, and this bus is about 10 feet longer than that, so it took one practice run to kind of get used to it, and I finally got through all the obstacles and only hit 1 cone before I decided I'd quit and go back Saturday for the regular contest. But bus is 8.5 feet wide, and you start out with one of the obstacles is 6 barrels on each side of the bus, and they're start out at a little bit over 9 feet between the 2 barrels, and time you get down to the deal, they're just a little bit over 8.5. So you got to be running pretty fast to get through there, and hope you don't knock them out of the way. Which they're empty rubber barrels, so they go flying everywhere, So anyway, went to the league, and one of the seminars I went to was succession. And what that means is who's going to replace all of our retirees in a few years, the people that have been here for a long time and got all the knowledge and experience. And it was quite interesting, and I was talking to Andy about it after the class, and he's already working on a program. He's already about 6 months ahead of the rest of us on this, so he'll bring it out next year about what we're going to do. Two of the other classes I attended was the, excuse me, one of them was on the San Bernardino terrorist attack last December, and that was quite interesting, the story they told about that, with the amount of San Bernardino city policemen that was there working on this event. It cost the city $1 million in overtime. That don't include what the CHP and the county sheriff and the other outside agencies that came in and helped them, but that's something to think about. If we have an incident like that, it's going to be a very, not only does it cost a lot of people their lives and injuries and everything, but it's very, very expensive. And they said they investigated for 3 days and turned it over to the FBI to go ahead and finish the investigation. The next day was the second part about the active shooter and what to do, and our lieutenant and sergeant and those guys have gave us some classes here in City Hall for the city employees on what to do if anybody comes in and starts shooting at everybody. But it's very interesting over San Bernardino, and I think they do things a lot different than the normal world anyway. But San Bernardino County Sheriff stationed in Cucamonga, and the county fire department over there, they combined. They're now teaching the firemen, and they've got them armed with protective gear, trying to train them where they can go in during the attack and start taking care of the wounded. Myself, I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, the wounded need to be taken care of, but I don't see putting anybody else's lives on in danger. But it was quite an eye-opener about, I mean, we've had classes here on the active shooter. I've been to the school over in Eastvale and watched the sheriff's department train on the active shooter. If you ever get a chance to see one of those training deals, it's well worth it. It will really open your eyes to how well trained our department is, our Riverside County Sheriffs, and what they have to go through on this. And one thing I learned, being a citizen, you don't want to get involved in any of this. You don't want to interfere with the sheriff's department or the fire, the paramedics, anybody. What they recommended that the elected officials do is try to take care of the family members of the ones that are wounded or killed in there while the sheriff's department's doing their job. You know, is keep them, citizens patrol or part of the sheriffs that had to keep them out of the area where they're at, but the elected officials and city staff could work with these people trying to console them and everything. But that was a pretty interesting 2 classes, and you never know when it's going to hit. And this was a man and woman that went into San Bernardino and just ripped everybody apart before they got out and got shot themselves. But on a final note, and I thought this was pretty neat, last week I saw a video of Silver Lake's 1-year birthday. And I thought that was pretty interesting that in 1 year there's been 750,000 kids or athletes go through that place. That's a bunch. And really helping our city out. And it shows a picture of what Silver Lakes looked like before, which we all know it was a tumbleweed patch. But now it's a beautiful place, and they've got the palm trees around the lake, and everything looks real sharp. So I think that Silver Lake's been a blessing to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I attended actually Saturday morning a incredible walk. The Support Sisters, Boots on the Ground Against Cancer. They raised $20,000, and it was really nice. I saw Gina out there, and it was really a great event. If you don't know what that is, it's a lot of times when you do stuff for cancer, it kind of goes out of the community. But they've done their first annual walk. All the money goes to help local people who need wigs, just deductibles, things like that for local women who are fighting breast cancer. Went to the Ira Calvert YMCA dinner, which was really interesting, a lot of fun, got to see a lot of people. Finished up yesterday on the Norco College President Search Committee. It's been narrowed down now to a select group of people, and the applicants were phenomenal from all over the country. The kind of people that when you're in the room with them, you just sort of want to sit straighter. Today I attended the Asian Businessmen's Association. They are making a big push to bring businesses that are run by Asian Americans here in Norco. The alert folks, the long range reconnaissance patrol people, I've received several messages and phone calls thanking us and telling us that their association convention was actually the best that they've ever had, and they've never had a city that so embraced them, so I was really proud of that. League of Cities, it was really interesting. I went to some of the same ones that Ted went to, engaged through social media. It's amazing, just a year ago, or a little over a year ago, I walked through the League of Cities with Andy, and I was just kind of like, I'd like to have that, and I'd like to have that. And he said, I'm working on that, I'm working on that, I'm working on that. And here in a couple of weeks, it looks like the final piece to become more transparent and communicate, Andy has put together. We've got Twitter, we've got a new website, we've just got all these incredible things that we're now doing, which is remarkable. So I kind of sort of had a checklist. Engaging youth in city government, one of the key things they talked about was creating a committee of youth, and so I was really proud to sit there and go, well, check that one off. The whole Hindu thing really bothered me because you just never know. I really felt that our decision was the correct one, but I wanted to make sure that I was inclusive, so I took a class in inclusivity, and I was really proud of the fact that they talk about having, minorities in your staff and having just people with disabilities, and I was just thinking, we just as a matter of course we just hire people, and I'm real proud of our wheelchair basketball tournament that's coming up, and I feel like all of our parks, Brian, working with him for 10 years, we've always, whenever we planned a park, we always planned it so it was inclusive. So I was actually very proud of the fact that little tiny Norco, that's this blip on the map in the middle of a liberal kingdom, is doing stuff that everybody's telling us we should do. It's sort of a little dig. I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. I had a great meeting. I couldn't go to the homecoming. I was really disappointed. It's really kind of neat that 3 Norco High graduates are on council, but I had to go to the Navy ball. And it was really cool, but the best part was I got to have a long conversation with Captain Murray, and Captain Murray, lo and behold, is on our side. He wants to save every building that he possibly can. He's on board, and I was just really, really glad to talk to him, so I'm going to send him a bunch of stuff, and that was very cool. The WRCOG, we had that meeting. Basically, we talked about housing issues, and mainly what was nice is I've been placed on the CEQA Advisory Committee. RCA, primarily it was mostly closed session things about purchases to add to the acreage. Unload I also attended, but Robin did a very good job doing that. I would encourage everybody, if you can, come November 1st to the Arts and Media. It looks like it's going to be fun. On October 27th, 28th, myself, I'm not sure the dates, but myself, Andy, and Bill Wolkman, we've been invited to the Redlands, some sort of shishi affair, and we'll be meeting the State Historic Preservation Commission, and we'll be meeting the State Historic Preservation Officer, so I'm looking forward to that. Silver Lakes, I was just told today, and it's official, it appears that next month they'll be opening the performance area around the lake. And so that's going to be very exciting. It looks like it's going to be up and running, and they'll be having a ribbon cutting. So I'm looking forward to that. Wheelchair basketball this weekend. I'm very proud of that. We got 4 teams playing. Staff did, Brian, a fabulous job. We found out we were right in the middle of the Disability Awareness Month. So I guess we kind of lost a little ground on being inclusive. We should have known that, but it made it hard to put teams together. But we got 4 teams, and they got t-shirts, and there's no application fee, and we raised a lot of money, a lot of support. November 11th, we have the Veterans Day. We have flyovers, all kinds of cool things. December 7th, we have coming up. The film festival was set last night. It'll be occurring in early March. I can't think of the date. Friday, we'll have a big thing with all veterans at Norco High School where the students will get to interact with veterans. So any veterans out there, I want to see you there. Ed, Alan, back there. And then Saturday, it will be Remembering Vietnam. We don't forget our heroes, and we'll do a film festival with 2 films from Vietnam, and then we're going to have 2 sessions, one with Vietnam veterans on the stage talking about their experiences, and then we'll be giving some recognition awards to Norco High teachers who spent years at Norco High and who were also Vietnam veterans, Benny, people like that, Ronnie Klein, those kind of people. And that's all I have, and so moving on to item 2, City Council consent items. Does anybody wish to pull an item?
I have questions on G and H.
Okay, Greg. G and H.
D, and he's already pulled H, so.
Well, did you say G or?
D. D is in.
Oh, you said D, Greg? G. And H. Oh, okay. And so you want to pull
D.
Got it. Ted, D.
And H, but he's already pulled it.
Okay. Robin?
F, please.
F. Berwin? Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept all the remaining items?
Motion to approve.
I'm second.
Council members Grunmeyer. Hannah. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newton. Mayor Bash.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Let's go to item D since it's the first one in the alphabet. Quarterly investment report for quarter ending.
Yeah, I just have a few questions here real quick. I noticed that we're in compliance, and then I looked through here, and Gina, this is probably yours. What I notice on, and this is on your attachment, or for page 1, where we show deficits in the miscellaneous grant funds in LMD2. Those
It's the cash balance, and so just for example, in terms of LMD2, property taxes haven't been received yet.
Okay, so that's what we're waiting for on LMD2, just the property tax? Correct. Okay, and what about the miscellaneous?
Just to add to that, we know historically we have had a cash deficit.
Correct. It's.
But I want that.
Okay, so that's historically why it's still a deficit, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the miscellaneous grants funds, I'm just trying to understand, why do we have a deficit in that? We don't have the grant funds yet?
Correct. It's a timing issue.
Okay, all right. And then I think I had, that was the only questions I had on that.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Council members Grunmeyer. Hannah. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newton. Yes. Mayor Bash.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The city clerk, I assume that we didn't have any cards on any of the other issues that we had motions on.
No, nothing from the consent calendar.
Okay, moving on to F, Robin.
Chad, this would be you, correct? So, I had a quick question. It is my understanding there has not been any clarity on the flood control, primarily as it runs behind properties on Temescal between the second section of 3rd Street and over to 2nd Street and through, well, up to Temescal through the high school. Is that covered or open?
My understanding, the initial plan the section that's going through the high school would be open, but I think there's potential discussions about making it closed. But we haven't seen the final plans of what they plan to do. This is right now just the preliminary agreement providing the access and easements, and also that we agree to take care of our relocations, etc., prior to their work beginning.
Okay, and do you have an estimated timeline? I see on Exhibit A, it talks about stage 1, and then it's got line S1 and then line S5, and then it talks about the South Norco Channel as stage 6. Do you know timelines on those?
Well, what we've been given as timelines at this point is that they hope to go out to bid in early of next year to maybe start construction in probably April, is what we've been told. But it's all tentative. But like I said, the fact that they're this far, it's been quite a few years that they've been developing this project. So, like I said, it's going to be a big benefit to that area once this project does start.
Okay, thank you.
That was my question too. Ted Rossi is under the impression that it's going to be covered, and it says here it's going to be a box. I put a call into John Fields over at the county to see if I could find out something. If you could find out and get back to us, that we'd really like that to be. I'd really like it to be covered, and to be able to have light use on top of it, which would be really great, because it's a real waste of space right in the middle of the high school. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Councilmembers Grunmeyer. Hannah. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newton. Mayor Bash.
Yes. Moving on to G, Greg. Is your mic on?
Chad?
Yes, sir.
This is the grant easement between Norco and Southern Cal Gas. I guess my question is on this, on the grant easement, what is the valuable consideration?
Are you referring to a specific area in the agreement?
Yeah, the recording. That, are we charging for this easement? Are we selling this easement?
No, this is
No, actually, it's, I hate to say this, but it's a legal term as opposed to something which is actual, that the parties between themselves have agreed that granting easement is valuable to the parties. Mm-hmm. And in order for a contract, one of the elements of a contract that you learn in law school is that you have to recite that there was consideration. And so that's what this is, pretty typical provision in virtually every contract.
So valuable consideration.
It can be non-monetary.
Okay.
Can be $1.
Then why would you have doc stamps fees?
I don't know what that.
Documentary transfer tax.
Because you're required to pay it. I mean, I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
If what you're saying then is you would have that transfer tax, but if there is no fee, right, no dollars being exchanged, then there's no tax. It's on your document. That's why I'm questioning it.
I'm not sure quite what you're asking. I mean, the for valuable consideration doesn't have much to,
right. It's on, do with that. Grant of easement, right. And you would have that transfer tax. So, is there a transfer tax?
No.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is no. It's submitted to the county.
Okay.
And this is a standard Southern California Gas Company form. So that if there isn't any, then there isn't any. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I know you are referring to the line of value, and it indicates in consideration value is less than $100. Again, I can't tell you because it's a county fee, but the county may charge essentially a recording fee. But there's no. If you mean that to pertain to below that, talking about computed on the full value of the property conveyed, there is no value to the property.
I don't have a problem with the easement. It's the form that talks about a tax and value consideration.
This is Southern California Gas Company standard form when it's between a public agency and they aren't acquiring anything other than an easement for the purposes of providing gas. There isn't any cost to the city.
But my expertise is not in legal documents. That's why I'm asking.
And the for valuable consideration doesn't have anything to do with that. For valuable consideration is just a recitation that there's consideration as an element of the contract. But no, I don't think that there's any documentary transfer fee. In part, it says the tax and the dollar amount is conveyance of property, and for value of less than $100 pursuant to Revenue and Tax Code 11911 is zero.
Okay, so we're not selling it.
There's nothing.
Oh,
it's
no,
just
no.
an easement.
No,
Yeah,
the
there's no permanent
documentary
exchange.
even if there was some cost, the documentary transfer tax is simply paying the county to transfer title. I mean, it has nothing to do with the value of the property.
And kind of what
It's kind of like
that
it's like a
before
recording
was,
fee.
Yeah. We've had in the past, different residents have always asked about that transfer tax, and probably that could also be an additional source of income to the city.
Oh, no, the transfer tax is something that the county/state charge. It's like a fee to record. It's for their
Right.
time. It's
Right.
not, we don't get any income, and there's no potential for the city getting any income.
Yeah, but in the past, could we get income from that? So that's
No,
just,
it's not our fee.
Yeah. But it was something that was triggered in one of our budget conversations a few years ago, so.
We do get revenues from transfer tax, property transfer. When there is a sale of real estate, for example, if a resident here sells a house, then there is a transfer tax at the rate of $500 for every $100,000 of value. That comes in the city. But that's not applicable in this transaction.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Are there any cards on this issue?
No cards.
Okay, do I hear a motion to accept?
I'll motion to approve.
Second.
Councilmembers Grunmeyer. Hannah. Hoffman. Mayor Pro Tem Newton.
Yes.
Mayor Bash.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Greg and Ted, moving on to H, whichever one of you wants to begin.
Just would this, Andy, would this go to you or to the sergeant?
I'll take the questions on this.
Okay. So I think I can answer my first question is we have 3 bids and we're going to take the highest bid based on that this is a local dealership?
Yeah, part of it is the get a 3% local vendor consideration.
Okay.
And when you factor that in, then they come up ahead.
Okay. Then when I was looking on the worksheet, just curious on the 2005 Ford that we're trading in, it only has a value of $500.
Yes, we do state in the staff report. I don't think we'll be trading it in.
Okay.
It's in here for the purposes of analysis. I believe we can sell that vehicle for more than $500. So I do look for us to sell it instead of trading it in.
Okay, unless it was blood stained or something.
Yeah.
Windows shot out. So then my last question. So we're gonna keep the 2005 Ford.
That's correct.
All right, sell it. Okay. I just couldn't see it. I thought it'd be worth more than $500. So how does the sheriff use the dually?
Can you use your microphone, Sergeant? Microphone.
We use it to tow the command post for towing evidence. It makes us self-sufficient. We use it at Ingalls Park. Right now, all our needs are serviced through either Harupa Valley by using their vehicle or using the city vehicle. So it makes us dependent on, well, for example, we have large items of evidence we have to tow to transport, and we have to do it by units or waiting for the availability of other vehicles. So that's largely, and also our Polaris. We have search and rescue operations. We have to tow it, and we have to figure out a way to tow because we can't legally drive an off-road vehicle.
See, I was thinking more undercover operations, like the dually would fit perfect in this town.
No.
Okay. Speeders and all of that. So I'm fine. Go ahead, Ted.
Okay, well, this is, and I'm looking at this and I'm reading less trading value. You already said the 500, so you answered that. But this was a sedan? Is that what we had here before? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So now you're asking for a half-ton truck?
Yes.
Because the F-250, and you're just telling me you're going to pull the command post and all that.
That's correct.
Are you sure that the 3/4 ton truck that you're going to get, that's only the 250 is a 3/4.
That's correct.
It's going to meet your needs. It's not a dually.
That's correct. And I know he said dually, but that's correct.
But it's not a dually. It's just a regular 3/4 ton truck.
That's correct.
But aren't they using a 1 ton over at Harupa to pull that trailer? I don't want you, John. What I'm getting at is I don't want
we
you.
We use a city vehicle now. Or Harupa, but right now for the main part we use the city's truck, which is just a regular truck.
Okay, so it's a regular 3/4 ton. It does it fine.
The city truck they use is a 250.
Okay, so what I'm getting at is I don't want us to buy something that's not going to meet their needs. If we need to upgrade and go to a 1 ton, and I don't want to pay the extra, but I mean, it is, I'd rather have them get something that's going to need rather than buying it just because that's what they think. I'm looking for future.
That's beyond our needs, even for the future.
The 1 ton?
Bro, that's correct.
The 250 is fine.
250 is fine.
3/4 ton. That's all I need. All right, thank you. Move to approve.
Second.
Councilmembers Grunmeyer?
Yes.
Hannah?
Yes.
Hoffman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newton? Mayor Bash?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Moving on to 4 public comments. This is the time when persons in the audience wishing to address the city council regarding matters not on the agenda may speak. Do we have any speakers?
Yes, Mayor, we have 1 card. Bonnie Slager.
Hi, Bonnie. How are you?
Okay. Hi, everybody. Yes, as Councilmember Hannah mentioned, our Norco Horsemen's meeting is tomorrow night, and I'd been talking to Caltrans, so I thought Caltrans was going to be our speaker, but I think I scared him a little bit when I said, well, you know, we've spent the last 2 years dealing with the 91 freeway, and now you're telling me for the next 3 years you're going to tear up the 15 freeway. So I don't think he wanted to show up after that. But anyway, so he's sending John Stanifer from RCTC, but the person I've been talking to at Caltrans will be there too. So in addition to talking about the freeway, they're also going to be telling us about the bat condos they're going to put in down under the freeway. And he says, I don't know what you guys think about bat condos. And I says, no, we like bats here. We think bats are important. He goes, okay, well, that's good to know. I called them trail fairies, but Glenn didn't like it, so our NHA trail elves have been out working again, and Brian, thank you for the nice letter. Our trail elves did a lot of work on First Street and then some of the other areas around. As you folks know, working on the trail fencing around here is kind of like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. It's never done, and whatever you do, something goes. But anyway, and also we have planned a trail cleanup on 3rd Street under the freeway. It's getting pretty shabby looking, and so I believe it's Saturday, November 5th. We're going to have a trail cleanup, and we'd love to have everybody join us for that. And so I hope to see everybody tomorrow night at our NHA meeting, 7 o'clock at the American Legion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
That concludes public comments.
Closing.
I don't interrupt you, Mayor, on public comments, but while we have enough people in there, I thought maybe Director Petrie could give an update on the Santa Ana River Arundo meeting that we had, that a lot of people attended before we lose our audience at the end, if that's okay with
council. Okay with that? Yep, go ahead.
At Riverside Corona Conservancy District, we met with them last Thursday, and residents, particularly along the Shadow Canyon Alhambra Reach, for an Arundo removal project. And this is a restoration project hosted by the district and to remove Arundo. As we know, Arundel is non-native to this area, was brought back in the 60s for stabilization project. It didn't work as it was hoping it would work. In fact, it's become an invasive plant. When it sucks up the water, it's also, and I think Chief Lane can talk about it. It's not something that CAL FIRE wants down there because it lights up like a match. And we've seen that about a year or so ago if Arundel does catch on fire. The one thing about the particular project is that it'll start at the end of October and will run. Basically, it's a 5-year project. The first 6 months is the mitigation, and then it's an ongoing monitoring project where they come back in and then they spray for it, they Arundel, and then they, if they need to, then they will remove it. This is basically downstream from the Hamner Bridge to Shadow Canyon, where it curves all the way up to Norco Drive. So it's a large area. It's about 115 acres, I believe. And so they'll be removing that Arundel. What it does open is opens up some of the trails that are not available there right now. They're going to try and be very cautious with the existing trails and trail markers we have there. They will be marking it, and the key is wheel post when they start, and it is only during the week. They will work from about 7 a.m. to about 3 in the afternoon, and no weekends. So weekends will be free and open. They will designate certain areas that are better passages, and they plan on working with our equestrian community in the process. The other nice thing about this is that they come back in after 2 years and they start a replanting program. So they will be replanting natives, the willows, some of our cottonwoods and things like that that we don't have in the river or abundance of. So that and some of the shrubs. So there'll be a whole restoration replanting program as part of that as well.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Brian. Thank you, Ted. Now close public comments. Moving on to 5 discussion action items, fiscal year 2015-2016 year-end budget to actual report. Gina.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Our auditors, White, Nielsen, Dill Evans, LLP, have completed their field work on the city audit for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2016. The Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, CAFR, prepared in accordance with Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, GAAP, will be submitted to the Council at a later date. Okay. I may need some help. Okay, unless I'm wrong. Yeah. Technology. A year completed and a path to a healthy fund balance. The presentation covers a brief overview by major funds, the general fund, year-end status, and fund balance. The fiscal year 2015-16 actual revenues and expenditures performed better than year-end projections for the general fund, the city's main operating fund, and the sewer fund. The water fund has a deficit mainly due to a continued decrease in consumption. A rate increase is proposed for January 1st, 2017. Other funds. The gas tax fund has decreased revenues due to lowered gas prices, while the NPDES, or National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System fund, continues to be supported by a $75,000 a year transfer to this fund. Expenditures were lower in this area in the salary and benefits area. Grants traditionally are balanced at year end. Expenditures cannot exceed the grant. For all districts, this is landscape maintenance districts, for all districts, actual revenues and expenditures for the fiscal year were reasonably within the amount in the engineer's estimate at the beginning of the fiscal year. LMD number 4 was the exception, as the district has been reimbursed by the water fund for the excess electricity charged over the last few years. The monies are available in fund balance. Next, we will look at the general fund and how it ended the year. Sales tax experienced a one-time increase due to the end of the triple flip and the reimbursement of sales tax by the state. This takeaway was done in the early 2000s, and we received the last portion of that in fiscal year 15-16. Consumer goods, restaurant, and auto sales continue to experience moderate growth. In this chart, you will see the sales tax history. You'll see that prior to the recession, in the year 2007, we received $6.2 million. We went down to a low of $3.3 million in 2010. And in 2016, as you can see, a little bump one time, 6.5 with the triple flip repayment. And in 2017, we're looking to go back to $6.2 million, which is still above our pre-recessionary figures. Now we're looking at general fund revenues overall. You'll see property tax receipts total $1.6 million, or an increase of $89,000 more than anticipated for year end. The net increase is attributed to $91,000 of a one-time receipt in residual monies associated with the successor agency due to the sale of a successor agency owned parcel on four-wheel drive. Other revenues increased by $61,000 due to increased ambulance fines, business license renewals, and animal control fines. Community services recreation, this revenue category includes programs, rentals, and special events. During the year, receipts from these sources exceeded year-end estimates by $106,000. The increase in revenue was primarily attributed to increased rental of facilities and a party partner's donation of $40,000, which was not included in the final budget. Community development fees include planning, building, and engineering fees. During the year, actual revenue receipts from these sources exceeded year-end projections by $57,000. The increase was due to better than anticipated increase in building, engineering, and planning activities. And Steve traditionally forecasts conservatively in this area. In terms of general fund expenditures, the total general fund expenditures for the fiscal year were below final budget estimate by $328,000. This net savings were achieved through successful expenditure control in departments, but mainly due to the budget savings of $371,000 in the CAL FIRE contract. Savings in the fire department came from lower than anticipated expenditures related to salary increases for the CAL FIRE contract. Additional savings were also realized in economic development and non-departmental professional services and various recreation programs. The Sheriff's Department was impacted by a prior year back bill and overhead charges, which resulted in $66,000 overage. Additionally, we budgeted about 7% increase, and it came in at about 8% for fiscal year 15-16 on their contract. As noted in the revenue section, the plan check expenditures are high here, or over budget, but they're offset by the increased planning revenue that we received, planning and building revenue. The city attorney provided $21,000 in additional services related to code enforcement in this last year. And Public Buildings Maintenance Division operations budget was overspent in order to handle unexpected repairs in HVAC, plumbing, electrical, fire, roof repairs, and security improvements. And now we'll look at fund balance. The audited, in this particular chart, this brings the two worlds together, the revenue and the expenditures. And you'll see our amended budget started at 17.2 in revenue and 16.8 in expenditures. We made a projection at year end that expenditures would be just below the budget and revenues would be significantly higher than what we originally projected in our original budget. And then the actual came in, as you can see, 18.2 million, majority from one-time revenues, and expenditures were lower than anticipated as a result of CAL FIRE. And that is the big picture. Now we're going to get into fund balance. The audited fund balance, which is really our savings account, began the fiscal year at 7.8 million. During the fiscal year, total revenues, as we just indicated, exceeded total expenditures by a total of $1.7 million. And this goes to fund balance, and it increases it to $9.6 million. Now, during the fiscal year, if you recall, our auditors came back and said we had to look at our deposit accounts as well. We were looking at that at the same time as a result of council's direction, too. And we worked with the departments and move those particular deposits to our general fund. And some of this is available in fund, it is all available in fund balance, but quite a significant part of it is designated for current programs. So we've got a new line in this illustration highlighting trust fund deposits attributed to the general fund of $525,000. This brings the fund balance to $10.1 million. It should be noted that the existing City Council resolution requires a minimum emergency fund balance representing 25% of total general fund expenditures. For fiscal year 2016-2017, total estimated general fund expenditures are looking to be at 17.8 million. That's the adopted budget, resulting in 4.4 million required to be maintained as emergency reserve. As of June 30th, 2016, the city has a total fund balance of 10.1 million, which represents 57% of the fiscal year 16-17 estimated general fund expenditures. And just to reiterate, a total of 359,000 of that fund balance is designated and held for specific programs as a result of the change in deposits allocations. This is it shows the growth over time, and this is where we sit at this moment. And finally, I do want to mention, we do have a special asset revenue fund, which has accumulated revenues over time from one-time asset sales and special revenue receipts. As of 15-16, the fund balance is $920,000. The fund balance declined due to the expenditure of $805,000 to purchase the successor agency parcel on four-wheel drive. This concludes the year-end budget to actual report.
Berwin, you have any questions?
I just want to say good job. That's a good report, and glad to see we have money compared to what we had a few years ago. But doing a good job, you and your staff. Thank you.
Robin?
I'd also like to echo what Councilman Hanna said. Excellent job. I did have one question for you, though. On the Special Asset Revenue Fund, the money that was expended, does that money, when it's replaced, go back into that asset revenue fund, or will that be going to the general fund when it's paid back?
Yes, the money will be going back into the Special Asset Revenue Fund. If you recall, what we did was we purchased that land, and through sales tax credit, the loan will be repaid back, and the proceeds from the payment of that loan will be going back into the Special Asset Revenue Fund.
Perfect. That was my only question. Thank you.
Ted?
Yeah, Gina, on your excellent report, by the way, I'd like that we finally caught up to that 10 million mark. Thank you. I'm just curious on your other taxes on attachment 1, page 1. Do you have it broken down to how many actually what the TOT portion of that is?
TOT is $521,000. Excuse me, the actual is $519,000 year end for TOT. We originally budgeted $418,000. We came back to council, amended that, anticipating $481,000, and we finalized at $519,000.
Okay, so that is almost $100,000 increase from the previous year, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, good.
Greg?
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
I think you're almost doing a little better than the guy that had this job before you.
What happened to him?
You know, I think we kicked him upstairs. But good, Andy, good job. Question, general fund expenditures. In building and safety, on the plan check services, we've overspent $16,472. Correct?
Correct.
How can we possibly overspend in plan check fees? Should that not be dollar for dollar charges?
If I can help you with that. Basically, there are two sides to the equation.
Okay.
One is the revenue side, one is expenditure. One is the revenue. In the one side of the equation is revenue, and the other side is expenditures. What the over expenditure means is that we required more services to meet up with the demand for activities. And on the other hand, if you saw the report that the revenues also went up.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not a net of, you're thinking about it as if the revenues and expenditures are netted. There is no net.
Okay, so just a budget.
Yes.
I guess then further clarification though is like in building safety plan check fees, those costs are dollar for dollar. If we collect certain fees and let's say our plan checker comes back and goes, oh, it took me more time, I need another $1,000, we don't absorb that, correct? That goes back as a charge to the applicant before any permit issuance. Okay. So is that the same then when we get to city attorney, provided $21,000 in additional services related to code enforcement? Still, this is just budget to expense, or are these?
That doesn't take into account the monies that we collected to reimburse those costs.
Right. Okay.
We did have some animal control fines that were increased as a result of.
That were increased?
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's not just animal control. I mean, the recovery of attorney's fees as a result of litigation would offset the 20,000 increased expense. I mean, we're still behind, but
if and when we collect those fees.
Yes.
Yeah, but again, there is no assurance that every dime we spend on code enforcement will be collected back as fees coming back to the city.
Right. No, actually, there's an assurance that that won't happen.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Again, this is a program that the city does in order to obviously make the neighborhoods attractive, to keep to keep the folks in compliance with the code. Is not designed to recover every penny that is expended on that program.
Thinking about putting you on commission and try to cover that cost. Everything else is fine. Thanks, Gina.
Yeah, Ted.
Okay, I have one question. Since these are properties you're doing code enforcement on, don't we charge these property and the people involved? Isn't there a lien process that we go through to help recover that process?
Yeah, it's not quite as simple as that. I mean, it depends upon the circumstances, depends upon the nature of the code. But I'll give you an example of one that we presumably will never collect. The amount, the 9 horses. That's and that's not related to the property. We can go after the people, which we've done. Actually, if you remember, for the first 9 seizure, we entered into an agreement where they reimbursed the cost. The second time we seized them, I mean, nobody's got any money and they've blown away. They're being prosecuted by the district attorney. But the likelihood, since it's a personal liability, of us actually collecting everything we owe is probably not terrific, although it's one of the things, for example, we'll look at through the district attorney's prosecution. But that's an example.
Do you have any cards on this, Cheryl?
No cards.
I was there, Berwin was there, and we dug out of the $3+ million hole, and and we were dealing with the fire department and dealing with the police department cost and the park that would never be built, and I had brown hair then. So I really appreciate staff a lot. The truth is that $10 million mark is very cool, even though I understand how it is. And I also think that we've set a record on sales tax revenue. And so I'm really pleased that the efforts of staff to bring in Hobby Lobby and Easy Up and Silver Lakes and all the things that staff has done, and the cuts and the let's face it, the salaries that aren't quite where other cities are, I really appreciate it. And what you've done for the residents of Norco is extraordinary. Very few cities have dug out of a hole like this, and I want to thank you very, very much. Any other comments? Closing. Moving on to 5B. Greg?
To receive and file.
I'm sorry.
Just to receive.
Motion to receive and file.
Motion. Second.
Councilmembers Grunmeyer.
Yes.
Hannah. Hoffman. Mayor Pro Tem Newton. Mayor Bash.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Get yours, Craig.
It's up there.
Don't start, I'm in training.
All partly pro on the interest rate.
Getting a lot of training ahead of time.
But before we begin consideration of item 5B, for the record, Mayor Kevin Bash recuses himself based upon his conflict, as he has with other issues related to this particular project.
This is a reconsideration of approval of a conditional use permit 2016-22. And Andy, are you going to give this
Yes, I'll
report?
give you a brief report on this. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council, the purpose of this agenda item is for the City Council to take a vote to determine whether to set a public hearing to reconsider the approval of a conditional use permit 2016-22. This is the Padaka CUP. If you recall, that conditional use permit was approved to allow a detached accessory building consisting of 2,000 square foot. That conditional use permit was previously approved by the Planning Commission on August 10, 2016. The Planning Commission's approval of that CUP was appealed to the City Council by the adjacent property owner. That appeal was had by the City Council, and the approval by the Planning Commission was sustained by the City Council. What is before you tonight is again for the City Council, based on the direction that was provided to staff on I believe it was in September, to decide whether you want to agendize or actually set up a public hearing to reconsider your previous action approving the conditional use permit. If the City Council votes to do that, then the item would be, a public hearing will be set. Again, I want to remind you that the only item on the agenda is for you to take a vote to determine whether you want to set a public hearing to reconsider this item that you previously made a decision on.
And I'll re-emphasize what Andy said, that this agenda item, you may not discuss the merits of whether or not you think the CUP should be changed, what the substance is. That's for the purposes of the public hearing, if that's what you choose to do. This is simply whether or not, based upon your review of the potential of additional information, that you feel it's appropriate to at least reconsider it and to set up for public hearing. But otherwise, no discussion of the merits of the CUP.
Does council have any questions of staff? Erwin? Robin? Okay. Okay, I have a question then, John.
Yep.
That, with what you just said, okay, that, is it permissible to ask staff, is there, in staff's opinion, is there a basis for reconsideration?
No. No, it's entirely the decision of the city council. City council has heard the matter, made a decision, and it's a purely city council's decision about whether or not they want to essentially reconsider it, in that they will solicit any additional information at the public hearing. Staff's view of whether or not it was appropriate to grant the CUP or not grant the CUP is not relevant.
Would it be relevant to ask, was there another question that should have been asked? Did we do all our due diligence? And I guess what I'm coming from is, we're lay people, staff are the professionals. So I'm trying to ask it as staff's professional opinion. That's not allowed?
Not really. I mean, unfortunately, the answer to that question would then lead into, and here's what we think. And no, that's not permissible. That violates both parties' due process, both the appellant and the applicant's due process rights, so that kind of information is limited to evidence presented at a public hearing, if that's where you go.
Okay. Does the clerk have any cards on this?
Yes, I do. Betty Bash.
And if I would ask any speakers if you can keep your comments to 3 minutes approximately. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to request that the CUP 2016-22 be reconsidered. In 2010, City Council and a large majority of residents expressed anger at the increase of the huge commercial-type accessory buildings that were being constructed all over Norco. It was felt that simply by their sheer size, these commercial-grade structures were impacting neighboring properties and the community as a whole. In response, an addition was made to the Municipal Code 18.45 that set a limit of 14 feet in height and 864 square feet. This was to allow ample room for motorhome parking garages, and anything larger required a CUP. The promise was made by staff that this would solve the problem. Unfortunately, we have moved away from the intent of the revision and the Municipal Code 1845. Staff attaches arbitrary conditions found in 1812 and 1813 that do not address the unique impacts on each site, and routinely recommends to the Planning Commission approval without the mandated impact study. Planning staff has taken it upon themselves to interpret the Code 1845 to exclude those things they feel are really for commercial zones and don't belong. The entire 18.45 was written specifically for residential in mind, and only a council vote of 4-1 can make such a change. Per 18.45, a building above 14 feet and 864 square feet requires a CUP for a reason: protect the neighbors and Norco as a whole. Granting the CUP or not is not mandated by the site size on which the building is proposed, but how the building proposed fits with neighboring properties. It is not based on the lot coverage rules found in 1812 and 1813, designed to dictate non-CUP zoning. Our school is located next door to 3596 Pedley Avenue. Our flag lot surrounds our neighbor with playgrounds bordering on the west and north sides. When our neighbors applied for a conditional use permit, the planning department should have done an impact study as mandated by 1845. This was not done. Again, I am asking that the CUP 2016-22 be reconsidered. Thank you for your time.
Linda Dixon.
Evening, Linda.
Good evening. I agree 100% with Mrs. Bash. I was around for all of those hearings in 2010, as were most of you. The intent that was established then is no longer the norm. I would go a step farther. I would like to see this reconsidered, but I would also like to have a moratorium issued on all permits until the conclusion of the ad hoc committee meetings. The ad hoc committee is meeting right now to decide some very, very important issues for this city. And I do not think it's beneficial to the city nor the residents of this city to continue with approvals of these type of buildings until the ad hoc committee has come to its conclusions. Upon reconsidering this particular issue, I would like to see it postponed until the conclusion of the ad hoc committee meetings, and that those conclusions being presented to the city council for their consideration. Thank you. Danny Leach.
Evening, Danny.
Dan Leach, 3300 Crestview Drive. I had a whole thing, a spiel I was going to do, but I'm not going to do that. The property next door, the school, the coverage is out of control compared to what's going to happen here. We bought that property with intent of doing what we've want to do, you know, the building. The building doesn't make any noise. The school makes a lot of noise during the day, which is fine. Everybody's fine with that. Stuff comes over the fence. We allow people to come over there and get it. We've been a good neighbor, you know, my kids. The property value, I've gone around Norco because of what has gone on here. I've gone around Norco lately to buy another piece of property. So I don't have to come in here and argue about putting my building up that I bought a year and a half ago. It's sitting on my property. It's probably a code violation, huh? Anyways, I've gone and looked at various houses with buildings in town. They immediately sell, and every single one of them had horse facilities. Every single one. So not only, you know, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. People that have horses have stuff, and they've kept them in these buildings. You know, today I talked to a realtor about another property. We're planning on selling our house so that we don't have to deal with this. But I don't think that because a neighbor who has caused a lot of grief comes in here and complains that they should take the property rights from my children. You know, I just don't think it's right. They're good neighbors. There's not been any problems there. The only time the police have ever been there was the day we moved in, and the neighbor called the police and said we were doing something that was absolutely not going on. The police indicated that it was the person next door that did it. They have not been good neighbors. You know, we've done everything we can to be legal and to get along with everybody. Thank you.
Penny Leach.
Penny Leach, Crestview. It makes me extremely sad to have witnessed all the ugly things that have been said to and about the Padakas. All of the rude, disrespectful, impolite, immoral, under-your-breath comments. All of the trumped-up BS that they might store 100 gallons of chlorine. Not one of you having or showing concern or respect for the rights of the Padakas. However, not surprising, it still sickens me to see how Norconians have acted toward fellow Norconians. It disgusts me. There have been many tears and sleepless nights during the appalling journey for the Padakas and their family, all for no reason, with no merit. This is about a bitter woman who doesn't even know her neighbors, and her son who pretended to be their friends. It's about something that this neighbor stated happened even before she moved to Norco. Plain and simple, she wants their property. The Padakas are neighbors who have never complained about the woman's business. They've never complained about people trespassing on their property, jumping the fence to pick up toys that children have tossed over the fence, people who park in their driveway because she doesn't have enough parking at her business, all of the cars coming and going, picking up and dropping off, so she says, 150 children each day. Not one complaint from the Padakas. And yet she is relentless in this campaign to stop the Padakas from having a building on their property, a place they've called home for nearly 8 years, a home that they've worked on and fixed up, turning into something much better looking than most of their neighbors, even receiving a beautification award from the city. I am partial. I'm Amanda's mother. She is my daughter. She's a graduate of Cal State Fullerton and currently the administrative supervisor for the Neuroscience Center at Children's Hospital of Orange. And Andy, he's the best son-in-law that I could have ever have wished for. Extremely hardworking and completely dedicated to his family. They would never think of harming a child, as many of you have alluded to. This family will stand firm against the schemes of the devil. We will fight fire with fire. And just in case you've forgotten, those who live in a glass house should never throw stones.
Amanda Padaka.
I'm sorry. Hi, Amanda.
Hello, City Council. I'm really sorry, but this is... I stand here in complete and utter shock, and I'm truly beside myself on why we're being forced to stand here again. Thank you so much. In front of the City Council, I don't know when's enough gonna be enough. We're still waiting for a legitimate and valid reason for denial, and reason to continue this agonizing process. I'm not interested in some manufactured reason that is made up only to benefit my neighbor's wants, but one that you have held every single other Norco resident to that has applied for a conditional use permit. How much more time, money, and city resources are going to be wasted fighting our project? The Planning Commission and the City Council over the last several years have set a very clear precedence in regards to conditional use permits. There are several things they look at and that are analyzed before making an approval or recommendation, and our project meets every single one of those. Furthermore, we have gone above and beyond to make our building more aesthetically pleasing, and we have agreed to every single condition you all have set for us. And that's probably more conditioned than in most buildings in the city. We were not only approved by the Planning Commission on August 10th, but again by you, the City Council, on September 7th. How many more approvals must we obtain before we can move forward with our project? At the September 7th meeting, Mayor Pro Tem Newton, you said, and I quote you, "I can't find a basis for denial on this project. It fits the code as the code is today. The lot coverage is correct. I did my own extreme massing formula and I took the most extreme parameters that I could come up with, and it still fits. It fits our code today, and part of the problem is you can't ignore the code for some and apply it to others. If we don't like the code, we need to change it." So after what sounds like extraordinary efforts on behalf of the City Council, our building still fits the code. It deeply saddens me that the City Council, in our opinion, has put forth so much extra effort and energy into trying to find a reason to deny this project. I would have thought that the City Council would want to try and be helpful and accommodating to homeowners like us, especially when we have made every effort to follow the rules and regulations you have set forward. I'm not sure what we have done to deserve this treatment. This whole process has been one of the most awful and stressful and discouraging experiences of my life. And to make matters worse, we now have to endure laughter and mockery in a public forum on the very topic that is causing us so much turmoil. Some of the behavior that was displayed at the Planning Commission meeting on October 3rd was quite eye-opening. You may or may not be aware, but accessory buildings are apparently the running joke of Norco. Everyone turned out to support the Disneyland project, which is great, but the behavior heard and seen, in my opinion, was extremely disrespectful and quite arrogant to display in a public forum. I found the whole thing personally offensive, given my family's current situation. From my perspective, there are people in this city who would rather act like bullies than friendly and kind neighbors. Apparently I wasn't aware, but if you don't own horses, then you aren't part of this inner circle, and you're not welcome here in Norco. That was my perception from some of the comments made at that meeting. There was one shining moment in that meeting, and it came from Mr. Robert Leonard, the chair of the Planning Commission. I sincerely hope he doesn't mind me commenting on his statement. He opened by warning people that what he had to say was going to make people extremely upset. He said, "We just approved a building. Even though it was for Disneyland, it was still a steel building, and they are running a commercial business out of it. When we talk about things like that and we try to help everyone, we can't do for one and not do for another." He went on to say, "We can't sit here and deny a building for one thing because a neighbor doesn't like it. And on that token, we did. And with one complaint, we should have denied Disney. I can't approve one thing and tell someone else they can't just because. It doesn't work that way." On September 7th, the City Council approved our conditional use permit 2016-22, and the letter we received stated that this decision was final. Final, in our case, only lasted 48 hours. If you decide here tonight to overturn that decision and send our case back to yet another City Council meeting, it will be clear to us that we will never be given a fair opportunity in this forum. We have submitted our plans and paid our $2,000 fee to the city over 4 months ago, and buildings that were submitted after us are already being built. We're not going to keep spinning our wheels if we aren't going to have any justice here. And in order to protect ourselves and our rights as homeowners, it may be best in our interest to retain legal counsel and have an attorney who will be more knowledgeable to defend us if we can't get a fair chance here. I sincerely hope we can resolve this matter tonight and be allowed to proceed with our permit. And speaking in regards to a comment made that our building should go on hold until the ad hoc committee makes decisions, there are buildings that are still today being approved that are already getting their permits. So why are they not having to wait and we are? That's not fair. And we're not being treated fairly here. And I would hate to believe that it's because of who's fighting against us. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes public comments.
Thank you. Bring this back to for any discussion. Berwin, or any further questions?
Yeah, I was going to ask John and you, Mr. Mayor. Can I make a motion that we postpone any decision on these any accessory buildings until the ad hoc committee comes up with some guidelines on them?
Not as to this one. I mean, you're at the point of reconsideration. It's just part of the process, the end of the process for their application.
Okay.
So, no, I mean, it's kind of part of the appeal process.
Thank you.
And if I could clarify, John, if no decision is made on this, by default, the previous action stands.
That's correct.
Yeah, so just to be clear.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, if you don't vote to reconsider it and to set the public hearing, then the CUP is in place. If you do, though, you don't have the, I think Byrne was asking, you don't have the ability to say, well, we're not going to make a decision on the reconsideration until somewhere down the road. The rules that apply to this particular application are the rules that are in effect today.
Mayor Pro Tem, real quick, did a little research on parliamentary procedure and what a reconsideration is, and then on some policies in the city. So I'd like to share those real quick. So the purpose of a reconsideration is to correct a hasty, ill-advised, or erroneous action, or to take into account added information or a changed situation that has developed since the taking of a vote. So that's what a reconsideration is in its primary form. So I've been pondering on that. I've been looking at a lot of the parts of the general plan that have been shared with me, and I will tell you this. We have a situation in our community with accessory buildings. There's not one person that will deny that. And unfortunately, I think this family has gone through a lot of grief as the flashpoint for this particular issue that we're going through. I had stated in a meeting before that we are, in my opinion, hearing a lot of appeals. In my opinion, when there are an excessive amount of appeals, the system is broken. I feel like in this particular issue, this neighbor war is the fault of the city. We have not been clear from planning on up. I think it's been pretty clear in my questioning of different things as we've gone through appeals and learning the process. Even as a council person, that stuff isn't clear. It isn't easy to navigate. We all have a very high standard of what we expect in Norco, and it's laid out in the land use policies. And I've done some research on that as well and read that. And so I just want to give you guys the introduction to the land use policy, and then I'll kind of finish off with where I'm going with this. In the land use policy in section 1.0, the introduction, it says the land use policy was incorporated to preserve small plot agriculture, animal keeping, and the equestrian lifestyle on a family scale. The land use element was established so that all other general plan support animal keeping, agrarian uses in perpetuity for future residents of the city. And I think that last part is one of those sticking points with a lot of residents. And I want to say this again. Our general plan is to support animal keeping, agrarian uses in perpetuity for future residents of the city. So we then go into this ugly place to try and navigate property owner rights with a general plan of a city that is so incredibly unique and specific. And we get into these muddy waters and we haven't figured out what to do. And this family is stuck in the middle when we've had other ones pass and we've nitpicked all kinds. We have another appeal this evening. If we, as a city staff, and ultimately the blame falls on the council, because I'm not one that believes it all goes downhill. As far as I'm concerned, it's at the top, and we're at the top. So we need to clearly communicate to our residents and to our staff that the overarching rules and principles need to be followed all the time. So if that means we have to have a poster in the planning department for staff and everybody to see just the introduction to our land use, so we can be reminded on a daily basis, this is why we're here. This is why Norco is Norco, then that's what we need to do. But since I feel like we're in the process of maybe working on that with the ad hoc and all those types of things, that for this particular item, the buck needs to stop here. The city council needs to take responsibility for a lack of clarity on the process, acceptance of plans and packets that may or may not meet what we think are requirements. We need to look at following policies and procedures that are already in place every time, all the time. And we just haven't done that. We haven't done that. So I feel horrible because I feel like we've created this And we've allowed it because we've allowed so many appeals to come forward, and we've gone back and forth and not necessarily been super clear in our directives to folks, particularly when it comes to land use and what Norco is all about. Norco is about agrarian lifestyle. Norco is about animal keeping. And again, I'll go back to in perpetuity. So if these accessory buildings are not something that we feel meets that, then as a city staff and as a city council, we have to make that clear. And we haven't done that. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I'll go back to the reconsideration to correct a hasty, ill-advised, erroneous action, or to take into account added information that has changed the situation or something that has developed since the taking of the vote. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Robin. Ted?
Robin stole some of my thunder, but I think one of the things that, and I was looking through the California Planning Guide that was established in 2005 by the state of California, and it puts down the 7 elements that all general plans must meet. 1 is land use element, 2 is the circulation element, 3 is the housing element, 4 is the conservation element, 5 is the open space element, 6 the noise element, 7 the safety element. Now, bearing that in mind, we are a charter city. As a charter city, we are exempt from requirements in zoning being consistent with the general plan. We have that luxury being a charter city. So, bearing that in mind, we'll go back to our charter, and Councilman Grunmeyer was very adamant in there, is that our charter, protecting animal keeping rights, zoning, and all that, it should be in there. It states in there, that is our purpose as a charter city. That's what Norco did on November 4th, 2003. The voters of Norco approved the charter, and it was so made effective, and I believe it was filed in 2006 with the state of California. And in it, our whole goal is to maintain our rural lifestyle, and animal keeping. 2014, and I was on a planning commission, and I remember seeing this general plan. And I thought to myself, okay, here's another great thing the state requires us to do, put this general plan together. It's a nice thing, we're going to sit it on a shelf and nobody's going to look at it. Well, I looked at it. And this city council, in the introduction and into the general plan, this was the amendment to the general plan for the conservation element. The city of Norco is incorporated to preserve a small plot agricultural, animal keeping, and equestrian lifestyle. Primary to this goal is the maintenance of residential lots that will accommodate and encourage animal keeping and agricultural at a family scale, a concept that dates back to early colonial times. The land use element establishes the primary goal of the community, which is the maintenance of that kind of lifestyle. All other elements of the general plan must be consistent. The conservation element works in conjunction with the land use element in providing the life quality standards that will sustain the community and support the preservation of small agricultural, animal keeping, equestrian lifestyle as a viable overall land use. In an urban setting, the city of Norco provides a unique opportunity to maintain this lifestyle that is not readily available elsewhere in the region. It goes on. This was done and approved by the City Council in December 2014. Maybe we let it slip by. Maybe we set it on the counter and nobody looked at it, but it's there. And it goes through this. And as I've said, and Councilman Grunware pointed out, it's broken. Our CUPs, conditional use permits, are not automatic. And unfortunately, even was on a planning commission, for some reason we made them automatic. A conditional use permit is just that. It's conditional on the fact that, on certain elements, but it has to be conducive to the area. And I think it's not anybody's fault, but I think we as a city council or council before us have gotten away from exactly that. Clear understanding that our preservation of animal keeping And that's what they did and tried to do in 2010. And unfortunately, it's gotten away from us. We're a small city, but we do approve a lot of conditional use permits because of our large lots. Is it right or wrong? I think we need to further investigate this and see and go through and see what really this whole matter and look at it that way. And as far as being the legal thing, and everything that I read on all this case law and conditional use permits, it boils down to, and I'm sure the city attorney will probably either correct me or tell me I'm right, as long as there's plans and it's done, and the legislative body up here, the council, is doing it for staying with the general plan and the parts of the government plan and the elements of the general plan, that's what we're doing here. Our charter tells us we can do that.
But you already approved it.
Ma'am, this is my time, thank you.
You've already approved it.
Let's give the councilman his time.
I don't know if you want any comment from me or not, but because I'm not quite sure where the comments go. But
I don't need a comment from you.
Okay.
But if you would like to make one, please go ahead, John.
Oh, I mean, actually pretty straightforward stuff, that actually, even though we're a charter city, that our zoning is consistent with the general plan and always will be. And there's a requirement that it be consistent with the general plan. As to conditional use permits, the requirements for conditional use permit are called out both in the government code and in our code. And the issue, I think, here's one of the issues that you need to have addressed in the granting of any or consideration of any conditional use permit is the impact on adjacent properties. And as I understand it, the issue which has been raised is whether or not that was done adequately. But that ends up being your call. And it's the only way that you're going to be able to affect anything that you did at the last consideration of this matter is to reconsider it. You can't do it tonight.
Thank you. Any other comments to John's comment?
Oh, are you ready for a motion?
I just want to say just a couple of things, yeah, but not long. I think we've all come to the point of that we know the problems that we're having with our accessory buildings, and from that ordinance in 2010 approximately. But the matter is, and we're going to address that as we go along with the ad hoc committee, but the matter in front of us tonight is just the reconsideration. And if council feels that we need to have a public hearing to reconsider this. Myself, that when we had our first hearing was, and then past that, what did I miss? Okay, what would I need to reconsider? I guess that's the question I've been asking myself is, did I miss something with this? Am I misunderstanding something? What would I reconsider in voting to set this public hearing? That's what I'm questioning right now. The applicant, and correct me if I'm wrong on the applicant certainly has a legal right to improve their property by what our codes are today. They've gone through the process with staff, planning commission, and then upon appeal to council. They haven't done anything wrong. But then I look on the other side to the impact for the neighbors, trying to weigh my decision. Did the planning commission do all their due diligence in consideration for the neighbors in the neighborhood? That's kind of what I'm wrestling with right now. But that's not...
I mean, essentially, that's the issue, I think, is, I mean, that would be the basis upon which you might consider reconsidering, or at least taking additional information.
I guess that was what I was trying to get to originally, was to ask that
clearly
question.
In the original hearing, you discussed at great length the impacts of at least most of the aspects of this use on adjacent properties. I mean, Ted read the requirements of conditional use permit, including the impact on adjacent properties. The question I think ultimately before you is whether or not the potential in a future public hearing is that you're going to hear something which is going to potentially change some of the conditions, or reaffirm your decision, or provide you additional information that you didn't have, which would cause you to change it.
I guess that's what I was searching for with my first question early on with staff. Would there be that information available? And I guess that's what we need to wrestle with. So I guess then the vote is going to be that City Council to vote on whether to set a public hearing to reconsider approval of the conditional use permit 2016-22. And that would be the motion.
Yeah, the motion would, I mean, if there is, obviously you don't need a motion to not reconsider it, but you could. But the motion would be to reconsider it and set it for a public hearing if that's what you choose to do.
I can move that as a motion if there's a second.
Second.
Councilmember Grunmeyer?
No.
Councilmember Hannah?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newton?
No.
That motion fails. Two yeses, 2 noes.
So explain that.
But
Then it's a denial.
That's correct. It's a denial, so that the current CUP stays in effect as originally adopted.
Okay. That will.
The CUP as was approved at the council meeting a month ago remains in effect. There would be no reconsideration of it.
Take a 5-minute break.
Bringing C, water and sewer rates discussion, Public Works.
Thank you, Mayor. This item has been brought forward for two primary reasons. This is a follow-up to a September 28th meeting we had regarding a public study session that was conducted and provide a review of the water rate study that has been developed over the last several months. That review was done with the City Council President and the members of the Streets, Trails, and Utilities Commission. At that meeting, we presented our findings related to the water and sewer rate study, reviewed all those issues that we identified, alternatives, made some recommendations to the commission and the committee, the work group, excuse me, I should say. And with that, we're bringing forward our current draft of that report that we're planning to publish. You've been given the copy of the executive summary of that report. Tonight, our goal is to, based off a consensus from that meeting, which was to come forward with alternative 3 in that rate study, bring forward a discussion about and getting authorization from council to authorize the 218 notice that's required to send out, identifying the potential rate increases that may be considered and approved at a later date. Those are not being approved and considered tonight. It's just approval of the 218 notice, which has been provided to you, that details the potential rate increases both for water and sewer, and also to schedule the public hearing for December 7th, where we will hear and review any potential protests against that rate increase. At that time, that meeting, again, council would then consider whether they want to implement those rate increases that have been proposed. So tonight, prior to seeking that authorization, we did want to at least review the presentation that was given in the workshop workshop again to the council for public consumption. And then once that's done, we're happy to hear any questions from the council and or the public that may have a desire any questions. And then once it concludes, hence unless there's any changes to what's been proposed, we would seek the council's authorization to again submit that 218 and publish it and mail it out to all ratepayers and property owners within the city of Norco, and also schedule the public hearing December 7th. With that, I'd like to bring up David Hyder, who's with Hoxie Consulting, who will go over the presentation. And feel free at any time if you do have questions to ask any as you see fit.
Hi, David.
Mayor.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there we go. It's good to see everybody again, Mayor, City Council members. As Chad mentioned, this is the same presentation that we went over last time, so I'm not going to spend quite as much detail as we did in the work session, but do want to go over the results of the study so that the public understands what's being considered. So the agenda for this evening, we'll look at the study objectives, some key assumptions we look at in our financial forecast. We're going to look at a number of financial planning scenarios, how to address funding within the water and sewer systems, look at some rate designs and potential customer impacts going forward, talk about drought rates, and then we'll summarize our recommendations. So in terms of study objectives, we've completed comprehensive rate studies for the water and sewer systems. And as part of that, we've developed a projection of a 5-year full cost of providing water and sewer service in the city. And a big component of that we'll talk about this evening is the capital reinvestment or your capital improvement plan. One of the biggest goals and common themes that we'll talk about tonight is the development of a financial plan that ensures sustainability and resilient operations within the funds. We need to account for the reductions in water use, as Gina mentioned earlier, in the impact of the water fund, as well as future variability. We've looked at various rate structures, both on the water and sewer side, and then to complete our analysis, we've developed financial models that the city will be able to use going forward to support the enterprise funds. So the key issue really running through the entire presentation and what we're trying to address is the fact that the city has experienced significant reductions in annual water sales over the last 2 years. Since 2014, you've seen about a 30% decline in water use. And as a result of that, your water operating fund balance has been exhausted. And in order to kind of fill the gap in this current year, you've transferred $700,000 from the capital fund into the water operating fund. And you're also selling 2,000 acre-feet of excess carryover storage in the Chino Basin, which will help fill that gap. But ultimately, there's a structural deficit on the water side. Going forward, revenues will not be sufficient to fund just the operations of the water system. And really the primary reason for that is the fact that right now 70% of your revenues on the water side within your current rate structure are based on water use. So when there's a reduction in water use, there's a direct impact to your revenues. So digging into that a little bit deeper, this is your current water and sewer rate structures. As you can see, right now your fixed charges that are on a monthly basis on the water side, they generate about 30% of your revenue. And that metered water use, which is based on the metered usage at the property, is charged at $222, and that generates 70% of your revenues. On the sewer side, it's flipped. The majority of your revenues are coming in a fixed charge. You get 71% of your revenues fixed on the sewer side, and then about 30% on the variable side. That's a summary of your current rates. So our initial recommendation, and just to hit this right off the bat, is in order to stabilize the water fund, we're recommending that you adopt an alternative water rate structure. And what we're recommending is that you increase the fixed monthly charge based on our cost of service analysis. And what that analysis has developed is in the fixed charge you would recover the cost of customer service, metering, and system peaking costs. And as you increase those fixed revenues, it would reduce the city's dependency on metered water usage. So what our cost of service analysis has determined that if you recover those costs, you get about 46% of your revenues in the fixed charges, with the remaining 54% in the variable charge. So last little bit of background in terms of our study assumptions. These are what we've used to look out over the 5-year projection period. We've taken your fiscal year 17 budget and forecasted that forward on a line item by line item basis. Most of those costs go up at inflationary levels. We're going to talk about different CIP funding scenarios. We are assuming going forward that on the water side, We're not going to see a return to historical usage levels. That once those changes happen, typically they stay in place. We're seeing modest growth in customers. We're recommending that you maintain and establish reserves both in the water and sewer fund. In the water and sewer fund, you should have an operating maintenance reserve, which is 3 months of your operating expenses, or 25%, which is a current city policy. And in the water fund, we're also recommending that you establish a rate stabilization reserve with a target of getting to $2 million over the next 10 years. So once you've established that, unless you use it, you wouldn't continue to contribute to it, but it would provide resiliency within the fund. Again, the modified rate structure, and given the health of the water fund, we're recommending that you do take immediate action, that the rating adjustments that would take place would be effective January 1 of 2017, and then subsequent adjustments would happen at the beginning of each fiscal year through 2021. So those are the backgrounds. We've looked at a number of different financial planning scenarios to address the issues both in the water and the sewer fund. They're listed here, and I'm going to go through them with the diagnostic view of the financial model. So this is the dashboard in our model, and it just shows you the some various results from the analysis. So up at the top we have the increase in the rate. So this is a status quo. We're not proposing any adjustments. In this scenario, we also have what the average customer's bill is today. It's $65. Your average customer uses 20 HCF. And then down on the bottom, we have a number of graphs that show the condition of the fund. So your revenue fund is currently at 0. Your capital fund currently has a balance, but it would be spent down over time. This is the spending in the CIP, if you execute the full CIP. And then over here is an important output from the model that shows basically the annual revenues in the fund. So cash in is in the blue line here. The purple line would be your operating expenditures, so that does not include capital. And then if we add operating and capital, we're on the red line. So as I alluded to earlier, we are at that structural deficit where we have a shortfall. We can't even cover our operating expenditures on the water side. So under the status quo scenario, if you don't have rate increases and you execute the full currently adopted 5-year CIP, your revenue fund or operating fund would essentially be negative in fiscal year 18, and it would continue to deteriorate. Not only that, you would default on your loans, your outstanding bonds. You wouldn't be able to purchase water, and it'd be a pretty dire situation. So something needs to take place. So the next few slides just look at some alternative scenarios. So the first one here is if we fund the full CIP over the next 5 years, and we transition to funding the operating reserve, getting that back up to 3 months. We create the rate stabilization reserve very gradually over time. The resulting increases, though, that would be required to do that are shown here. So pretty substantial increases, 30% for a couple of years, and you can see the impacts to the customer's bills. It would go from $65 up to $88 and then on forward. So pretty substantial increases. The next scenario we looked at was what happens if we issue some debt. So if we take a pretty significant portion of your 5-year CIP and we borrow $21.4 million, which would be about 80% of the CIP. We again transition to getting back to 3 months operating. We fund the rate stabilization reserve, and then ultimately the resulting rate increases would need to be 14% for a couple years and then a little bit less. So certainly that has less of an impact on the customer in the short term, but under a borrowing scenario, we are anticipating that you'd borrow and then you'd be issuing debt that would have a maturity of 30 years. So you'd be paying it off for 30 years. You would pay significant interest on those borrowings. So there's that additional cost. So I can say in the short term it would be less expensive to the customer, but in the long term it would be more expensive because you have the interest expense. It also limits your flexibility going forward because you have those ongoing debt payments. So our third scenario was to look at what happens if we just execute half the CIP. So we take your 5-year CIP, we spread that out over a 10-year period. Same scenario where we transition to funding the O&M reserve, fund the rate stabilization reserve, and you can see the resulting rate increases. So they are more gradual than the other scenarios. We're only executing half the CIP, but we're not tying our hands to some degree with having that debt service going forward. I do have a summary slide here. The top chart just shows the each of the scenarios in the annual capital funding. Note under scenario 2 that you would be issuing debt. So of that $26 million, you'd be issuing $21 million. The middle shows the rate increases that would be required, and then down below the impact to the customer. So ultimately, scenario 3 would have the lowest impact, with the caveat that you're obviously investing less in the water system. So we did the exact same scenario, in terms of our recommendation that we presented to the council and the Streets, Trails, and Utilities Commission was scenario 3. And I'll talk about that more in a little bit, but we are believing that that's the best and most prudent approach at this time for the city. So we did the exact same analysis on the sewer side. Fortunately, on the sewer side, you're not in the same dire situation. A big piece of that is the fact that you have such a stable revenue stream with 71% coming from the fixed charges. If you don't do any rate increases, though, and you execute your CIP as it's published, by 2020 you would be negative on your operating fund cash balance. So you would have exhausted your capital fund balance and basically have no more funds in your operating balance. So it's not a sustainable option going forward if you're going to execute the full CIP. So we looked at the exact same scenario. Scenario 1, if you execute the CIP, you maintain those 3 months operating, what would your rate increases need to be? You need to do about 6% for 2 years and then a little bit higher going forward. But again, that's executing the full CIP. Another scenario, what if we borrow? So given the health, we're not borrowing quite as much, $7.5 million of the CIP. That would buy us basically a year in terms of rate increases. You wouldn't have to do one this year, but then going forward you have to do about 7%. And again, you have the interest expense going forward. So the third scenario, on half the CIP, maintain your operating reserve. This scenario would allow you to not have to raise sewer rates for a couple of years and then have pretty modest 5.5% increases after that. So again, I have a summary slide, and we are recommending scenario 3 as well. And part of the reason for that is that everybody gets a combined utility bill, a water and a sewer bill. And there are pretty significant increases on the water side, and this allows us to mitigate the impact in the combined bill. So somebody's sewer bill will not go up for a couple of years. So in terms of moving forward, we are recommending the partial funding of the CIP. I think that this is a prudent approach given the financial health of the water system. It will allow you to gradually increase water rates and then eventually sewer rates. You always have the opportunity to come back and more aggressively fund the CIP if you need to. It's important to note, though, that even when you cut the CIP in half, that's still an increased spending level over what you've been able to do recently. And you can still take care of the important projects, and Chad can talk about that in a bit. We're also recommending that you cash fund the CIP with scenario 3. That limits the interest expense and increases your flexibility going forward. So what that looks like in terms of the rate design, what we have here, this is the proposed new rate structure for water. And again, remember, we're collecting 46% in fixed revenue and 54% in the variable. So our fixed charges would go up, and this would be effective January 1. But the usage rate would actually go down a little bit. And that would get us the recommended revenue under the financial plan. So next slide, I have some sample bills. So if you remember, we're not proposing sewer rates go up. So this is a combined bill. So what this graph shows is for what the bills would be in fiscal year 17, starting January 1. Over the left-hand side, we have the monthly use. So if you have 5 HCF per month, or 10, or 15, or 20, the average customer in the city uses 20. You can see the number of bills that are generated at each of those quantities, the cumulative number of bills. So once you get to the average, about 68% of your customers use that amount or less. Their current bill is $116 a month. At 20 HCF, it would go to $129 per month, or a $13 increase per month. And you can see as you scale down and up, the impact to the customer. So what that looks like going forward when we apply the financial plan to the new rate structure. I've shown you the fiscal year 17 recommended rates, and then going forward, we would adjust the fixed charges and the usage charges to generate the amount of revenue defined in the financial plan. So in 18, we'd be back to the 222, and then we would increase from that point forward. It should be noted right now that you don't have any 10-inch or 12-inch meters, but we have calculated what those charges would be in case you had those customers come into the city. On the sewer side, we're not recommending any changes to the structure. And again, we're proposing that the charges stay the same for 2 years. In the third year, they would adjust at that 5.5% each year to generate the revenue in the financial plan. So this is a combined water and sewer bill for somebody with 20 HCF on a monthly basis. Their current bill, if you remember, I said is 116. It's going to go to 129 if the rates were adopted. And then each subsequent year, you can see what the bill would be, and then the monthly dollar increase to the bill. And the next slide shows how Norco compares to some surrounding jurisdictions in terms of water and sewer bills. I'm always a little hesitant to put these up because it's always difficult to get a true apples to apples comparison because of economies of scale and where people get their water, where they get their water from, and where their sewage is treated and things of that sort. So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. Also, we're showing the proposed rates starting January 1, where these are all the current rates for the other jurisdictions, but it gives you an idea where Norco would stand after the increase. A couple more items. This is more of an ancillary fee, but right now you have a private fire protection charge, and the city currently charges this fire protection charge on the same as somebody who has a 3/4 inch meter. So if you have a 10-inch private fire line to your commercial business or apartment or something of that nature, you pay $20.87 per month. What's fairly common in the industry is to recognize the fact that to be able to supply to a 10-inch line or an 8-inch line, you have to have a lot more water ready to serve them, essentially, and there's a significant cost associated with that. So we would propose that you'd go to a structure where you graduate the lines, graduate the charges based upon the fire line size, and those differentials between those are based upon the American Water Works Association flow equivalents for those lines. And this is a very typical approach within the industry. And then the last, and this is what it looks like going forward. So we would adjust these private fire protection charges, excuse me. So we would adjust them consistent with the financial plan going forward, and they would continue to be graduated based upon the fire line size. The last section is drought rates. It's fairly common in California with the drought and with the emergency water conservation programs to have drought rates, drought surcharge rates. And what we're recommending is to address future conservation requirements, the city should adopt drought rates, and these essentially would be standby rates that would be put in place in case of future conservation requirements. And it's important to note that these drought rates would be applied to all customers. So you've achieved basically close to 30% reduction currently. And going forward, as the, I don't want to say the rules of the game change, but if you were required to get even more conservation, and let's say you had to go down another 20%, or you bounced back up and then you had to get down to 20%, essentially these drought rates could be put in place if the council decided to, and they would provide the revenue back to make up for those shortfalls. So even though we're getting to a place where we have more stability, we have a rate stabilization reserve, and we have more stability in our revenue stream, this would provide additional revenues should you see further conservation efforts. So in summary, the current financial health of the water fund requires revenue adjustments. I think that's pretty clear. Based on the financial forecast, we are recommending that the city limit the funding of capital to allow gradual increases in rates and revenues. We believe you should continue to focus on maintaining your 3 months operating reserve, but also establish a rate stabilization reserve in the water fund. And again, we're proposing to fund that gradually over time. And once you reach those targets, you would no longer need to fund them, but it would provide you that stability in the future if there were some unforeseen emergencies or expenditures or things of that sort. And then finally, again, to provide revenue stability, we're recommending an alternative water rate structure where we increase the fixed charge to get that revenue from 30% up to 46%, and that would reduce your dependency on the variable revenues and susceptibility to future revenue impacts due to conservation. So as Chad mentioned, if the council authorizes the staff to move forward, the staff will mail out the Proposition 218 notice to your customers and schedule a public hearing for December 7th. You would hold a public hearing on December 7th, and then new rates would become effective January 1st. And I thank you for your time.
Does council have any questions? Berwin?
No, that's pretty much what we had the other day when we had this presentation, so it's pretty clear.
Robin?
But anyway, thank you, David.
Appreciate it.
No. Greg?
Good report, David.
Oh, thank you.
There's no question that what we need to do with water rates, but I did notice that when you got to sewer, you did put in the non-connect fee.
Correct.
And is it currently $19 a month?
It is.
And if I remember right, it would stay consistent for a couple of years.
Yep, I'll bring it back up here.
Okay.
I would stay consistent because we're adjusting it consistent with the needs within the fund.
Yeah, I'm just not supportive of the non-connect fee.
Yep.
But at least through this Prop 218 hearing, my question would be that if that passes, then it's for that 5-year period?
Correct.
Correct.
This is only for the period that we're specifying in the 218. We can't go beyond that.
Okay, so just for this 5 years?
Yes.
I just have heartburn on that. I just don't quite see if, the residents that are on septic, that we always tried to sell them on this, it reserves capacity for you at the water treatment plant. And they've been paying it all along, but I've never seen where their capacity is going to change. I'm that household.
Well, I don't think it's that it would change. It's just simply it's reserving a capacity because they exist, because that household exists, that we at some point it would transition, and so we're holding that until it's actually used.
But why does my reservation fee for capacity have to increase? I'm not doing anything, if I'm a non-connect, I'm not doing anything to affect that.
It's primarily because of the cost of capacity is increasing. I mean, they're maintaining the facilities and things of that sort is the primary driver. And it's almost like the fire protection charge. This service is available if they connect, and you're making that available to them, to their property.
And
there's availability.
if you were going to connect, then you would pay that current connect fee, whatever that is, at that time. And I would think that fee would accelerate every year, so that that would make the city whole.
You're talking about the impact fee?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's paying for backbone facilities and things of that sort. So,
but once I connect, then I'm connected, and
you're on the regular fees at that point.
You're on the
and I have capacity.
Right.
Right.
Yes, because you bought in.
Yeah. So that fee to me would adjust that at the time if you were to choose to disconnect or connect.
You're talking about for the non-connects.
Right. I'm just being argumentative about it.
No,
that's all it is.
So there's more people paying, so you're thinking the fee would change?
I don't. The number is not that great. Do you recall how many we have on septic If I'm saying 800, is that?
Less than 1,000.
Less than 1,000.
Yeah, I think it's 800 currently
Yeah.
now. It wasn't to 1,500 many years ago, but now it's
They're older homes, which to me has always meant older residents. I can take it all the way to the fixed income thing, that maybe that impact is, there's not much gain with that, so why not leave it alone? And I won't bring up the argument, look at the money we could save if we got rid of Western Municipal at the sewer treatment plant. Okay. Yeah, keep your mouth shut, right? Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you.
And looking at the 218 notice, and that's all we're talking about tonight. So we essentially, when we did the study session, same material, very good, by the way. What I'm thinking is, so that what we're actually doing, not only approving the 218, we're going through and accepting the scenario 3 type situation. Is that what we're doing? Okay. Okay, all right, that's fine. Now, the one thing that we asked was to put a senior adjustment or a rate in there. Did we ever get?
And we discussed that because that senior rate is paid for out of the general fund. That's something we are working on reviewing and doing the analysis to find out how much it should change in reflection of the increases here. But it's not a requirement because it's a subsidy that's provided by the general fund. It doesn't have to be approved in the 218 process. Okay, so that's going to be done separately, but will be brought forward hopefully at the time of the hearing, so at least have that information to say how that would change.
Yeah, and unfortunately, under the statute, you don't have the ability to do that in the rate structure. The only way you can do it is by essentially offsetting it with general fund expenditure.
Okay, as long as we are going to put that in, thank you.
Do you have any cards?
No cards.
Okay, opening and closing the open hearing. Do we have a motion to approve to move this to a scheduled public hearing for December 7, 2016?
Motion to authorize staff to mail the Proposition 218 hearing notice and schedule for a public hearing on December 7th, 2016 to adopt the adoption of the multi-year increase to water and sewer rates.
Second.
Members Grunmeyer, Hannah, Hoffman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newton.
Yes.
Mayor Bash.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Moving on to 6A, an appeal hearing, conditional use permit, Foley, 2016-24.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This is a project for an accessory building that was denied by the Planning Commission. The proposal is for a 1,560 square foot storage building at 2272 Lone Star Drive. The location of the structure where it's being proposed is at the rear of the property, up against the setback to the corner street, which is Belden Drive. The building meets all of the setback and height requirements established in the Norco Municipal Code. And when the applicant brought the project forward, he was warned by staff that one of the issues that the Planning Commission has had recently with accessory buildings is if the access to the building for vehicles would have to cross the open animal area. And as proposed, this one would require vehicular access to the proposed storage building to have to take access over the open animal area. The applicant indicated that he wanted to proceed forward with it as designed the way you have it in your packet. And one of the reasons he expressed to the Planning Commission was that by moving it to the other side, it would place it in at the 5-foot setback requirement, would place it 10 feet away from a similarly sized accessory building on the adjoining lot. And he didn't think the appearance of the two together would be as attractive as moving it to the other side. So he requested that the project that you have before you go to the Planning Commission as it was designed. The Planning Commission did bring up the issue of the access over the open animal area being required to get to the accessory building. And one of the issues they have, even though that's not restricted by the code, in their discretion to protect animal keeping, they've expressed before on similar projects that when since the city does not require permits for them to do flat work, they could easily go in and put in a driveway up to the accessory building. And the Planning Commission perceives this as being a step in the direction of making the lot not conducive to animal keeping. And so based upon that, the Planning Commission denied it, and that denial has been appealed by the applicant. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation.
Do you have any questions for Steve?
Denied with prejudice or without?
With prejudice.
With prejudice.
Yes.
So this could go back to planning
No. Well, it could if they wait a year.
after a year.
Right.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Is the applicant here? Good evening.
How are you?
Good.
Thank you for taking my appeal. The planning commission pretty much said exactly what he said of coming through the animal keep, and there's a very gray area on code of where you can and cannot do that. And nobody could really give me a straight answer if you can or if you can't go through there. I don't know if it's on that set of plans, but we have over the minimum amount of 2,800 or 2,807 square feet. I think we're over 3,000 some square feet. That is for my animal keep area. And like this gentleman here said, if I moved it over, it is close next to that other existing center block building. So I wanted to move it over to the back left-hand corner side. But the other reason for that is too, if you were to put it next to him, you block the entrance to get back to that corner where your animal keep should be. So it's pretty much a waste of space back there. And there's no access on Belgian Drive to kind of come up from that Belgian area on Belgian Street together, because it's on a elevated lot with a retaining wall. So my thought was to put it back in that corner so you still have that huge grass area where next to the center block building, so you can still have your animal keep area in there, and you would have to come over just a corner of the animal keep to get over to the accessory, but not the whole thing. And it's just like what people keep talking about, if you don't have animals in Norco, they pretty much don't want you to be here. If they see an accessory building going up, they pretty much said why they just deny you pretty much with, I mean, if there are people that have buildings, and if you're around my neighborhood, there's probably 15 or 30 of them around me that are all center block stuccoed, not stucco, but center block accessory building. Mine's going to be stuccoed wood to match the house, tiled roof to match the house, so it's uniform on the property. I'm just asking to, take it into consideration to let it approve and go from there. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do we want to hear public speakers, or do we have any questions for the applicant? Any cards?
Yes, Mayor, I have one card. Mike Thompson.
Hi, Mike.
Good evening, council members. I'm a little concerned that Mr. Foley's been made to look uncooperative in the staff report and also in the minutes from the planning meeting with his project. A little background on that's missing is the circumstances is when staff was working with Mr. Foley and not going forward because of the concerns about the accessing the building through the animal keeping area. There was another project that was denied at planning for basically the same reason, and it was presented to council on appeal for the building access through the animal keeping area. This was fairly recent. And after your decision to overturn the planning commission denial, staff and Mr. Foley decided to move forward to planning as his project, as there were no codes preventing this, and you had overturned that other planning commission case. So that's kind of what's missing in the meeting, in the minutes here, is that why he moved forward. And you approved another fellow to drive his motorhome across his animal keeping area. Now that you can see the problem that's kind of arisen for Mr. Foley's denial. And, you know, if the project that you've previously overturned or driving across the Paca was a mistake, I'm concerned, is it really fair to Mr. Foley's project to be flat out denied without an opportunity to go back and work with him? So, thank you.
Any other cards?
No cards.
Closing public hearing. Berwin, did you?
Well, talking about driving across the animal keeping portion of the property, I shot horses out here for 30 years. And there's a lot of places to get to the work area where I had to go by the horse barn or wherever. I had to drive through the corrals to get there, drive through the animal keeping area. To me, that's no big deal. I mean, you got to get out and close the gate, open the gate, and then drive through and close it to keep the animals back in. But it happens all the time. But the thing that concerns me on this is the possibility of them going in there and making a concrete driveway or something for the animal keeping going where they could get back to that accessory building. Now, is there anything, Stephen, that could be put in a conditional use permit to prevent that they couldn't put a driveway back in there where the animal keeping is?
Yeah, I think you can. Well, John's saying yes, so that was my answer. I wanted to make sure that, yes.
And if they put this building in and then go in later and put in animal keeping, I presume they'd be like everybody else. They'd get rid of the grass and pack the animal keeping area down with DG. So they could go ahead and put a DG driveway back there to the access to get into the accessory building, even if they did have to drive across the animal keeping area. So that's my thoughts on it.
Robin?
So I'm going to go back to land use again. And I think moving forward, we need to make sure we're making appropriate decisions and going with the introduction to the land use policy again for animal keeping and agrarian uses in perpetuity for future residents. With that being said, I also agree with what Mr. Thompson said that, you know, if we're going to make a decision that maybe we don't like how this is, that we need to work with the resident on the project moving forward so that that person maybe doesn't have to wait a year or whatever the case may be. Because it's going to take time, in my opinion, to kind of change the culture and what prior practices have been. My concern is that we just make sure that we're preserving properties and having appropriate land use for them. But I also agree with Berwin. There are a lot of places in town where you got to drive across the Paca or you have to drive across the animal keeping area to get to the accessory buildings. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
What did you quote? I wasn't here, I guess, for that.
Oh,
What's the number?
The land use element, section 1.0, the introduction, in that Norco was incorporated to preserve small plot agriculture, animal keeping, and equestrian lifestyle.
So not 18.45.
No, this is in the land use
Gotcha.
element.
All right. Ted.
A couple of things about this. I kind of agree with the planning commission, and the reason why they denied it, excuse me, was because of the preservation of the animal keeping area. One thing that we see this, and we have a 40% lot coverage. This one's at 39%. It depends how you measure something. You know, one or 2 feet off, and now we're over 40%. So we're actually at almost the maximum. And it's been sold to me by a former planning commissioner, and now sits next to me. Is 40% too much? I don't know. Well, didn't know that. One of the conditions, and Berwin pointed out, is driving across. And what we did, if you recall on the other one we did that, is we made sure that, and I don't know of a deed restriction, but we include a restriction that area had to be kept or noted on the CUP for it had to be animal keeping, it had to be maintained.
It was a condition of the
condition of that was recorded as a animal keeping. No other building, nothing else on there. And if we're going to put it in there about that, so that it stays with that property, so that nothing else is built in front of it. And we're at 39%, so that's my concern is on this, is that it's again, we're going back to the CUP process, is that our whole point, and Robin says good, is to protect the animal keeping area. And we need to start controlling this because it's getting out of hand. So that's one thing I would do, is increase that to make it as part of the conditions that the area had to be designated as part of that area in front is animal keeping. And a deed restriction can apply?
No, there's no deed involved. It's just a condition of the conditional use permit.
But that is, okay, recorded? How about recorded, or?
Normally we don't record conditional use permits.
No, but I mean, somewhere we have to let any future property owners, or the fact, it's strictly on the condition that we can keep that. Okay, that's fine.
Well, and having them record the conditional use permit is fine. I mean, there's nothing which precludes them from doing that, or us from requiring it.
Well, if it's on file, then that's fine. Okay.
Greg?
I think I want to take exception to your comment on the condition that saying you can't put down concrete or DG on this. I guess one, how would you enforce it? But how can you put a condition on something that's not required by any building code to have a permit, that any of us can cover our entire yards with concrete? How could you condition me not to?
Because it's a conditional use permit. I mean, that's what a conditional use permit is. It's a permitted use subject to conditions. And so you're permitting that use subject to condition that there not be any permanent driveway structure. And whether you want to do that is another question, but there's nothing which prevents you from doing it.
I think you would have difficulty in enforcing it.
Okay, well, that's
code-wise.
Yeah,
but I'm just
because we never know that. But that's your call. If it's
but it's allowable by code. You don't have to have a building permit.
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't. Yeah, I mean,
so it kind of confuses me or gives me a little heartburn on that. More of my issue is on the location of this accessory building, and that the planning commission, driving across the animal keeping area. And I've always said that on my property, to get to my shop or my hay barn, I have to open my gates. I drive across my arena. My neighbor does the same way, okay? And, if she wanted to rebuild her barn, I think I would have heartburn with that she wouldn't be allowed to, because she has to drive across her animal keeping area to get to her barn. And then it kind of just smacked me a little bit, and I went, but you know what? I got a place to put my animals. That when I want to drive across my arena, I just don't open the gates and go, yee-haw, and let them all run out in the street or wherever they want to go. I put them in all their stalls. Okay? So what I did was I took this open animal keeping area that you're showing of approximately 3,000 feet or 2,800 feet, and I went, okay, I want to drive across my animal keeping area. I need some stalls or some stables. And I just drew that area in. Where would I keep my animals as I drive across to this accessory building? And wherever I would place it, it negates access to the accessory building. So I'm in agreement with the Planning Commission that this isn't the correct location for this accessory building, that it needs to be relocated, and that I feel that the applicant should go back and work with the Planning Commission. And I would support the Planning Commission's opinion on this.
I have a different take on all of this. What prompted my really looking at this, I was there in 2010. I know what we did. Berwin was there too. What really prompted me to look at this was the decision that Mike talked about, driving over Apaca. And then the other one was it was a sort of a different area where they were allowed to build certain things. But I began to look at 1812, 1813, 18.45, and very clearly we have not been adhering to 18.45. So Steve, was there a impact study done on this? Did you walk all around the property, do all the things that per 1845 it says you shall do, which means it's mandatory?
Yes.
You stood...
I did not. Alma did. It was her case.
Can you make sure she did that?
You want me to call her?
Yeah.
I can't call her right now.
I don't mean to be tough here, but I'm going to be tough, because the truth of the matter is you told me over the phone that you felt that some of the impact studies were commercial, when in point of fact they're very clearly laid out in 18.45, and you're supposed to follow certain guidelines, almost like a checklist.
Yes.
And the problem I'm having is I got 30 to 40 of these buildings that never should have gone up, in my opinion.
Well, we do analyze every project, and we analyze every project to see if the findings that support a conditional use permit can be made, and that's a report that we give to the Planning Commission. And if they agree, they approve it, and if they don't agree, they don't.
All right. Now, when you give that to the Planning Commission, are you absolutely sure that everything is within, it's correctly drawn out, everything's within ratios and everything? In other words, everything is accurate, all the maps and plans?
We make sure that we have the dimensions so that if it gets approved, they can pull permits per those plans.
Okay, so even if it's, in other words, out of ratio, in other words, if the plan is out of, I can't think of the word all of a sudden, but isn't in scale, because it says it shall be in scale. It says that that's one of the problems I'm having, is that you're giving things to planning that are not to scale.
They are to scale.
No, they're not.
Giving dimensions on the property.
But they have to be to scale.
They are to scale.
Steve, now if you like, I'm going to come to your office tomorrow and we can start looking at these things.
You are more than welcome to come to my office.
And I will. So part of the problem that I have is that what we were trying to do is build things that were 14 feet high and 864 feet. And so, for example, in the case of this gentleman, I went there, I stood at the house that's at the base of the hill. It's going to be huge. What will that do to the property values? That's one of the things under 18.45 you're supposed to be looking at. Because remember, the accessory building codes are to protect the neighbors. And what's been happening coming out of your office is that you're recommending things, and you put us in a terrible position where we have to play lawyer and we have to defend because you're recommending things that in 2010 we very clearly stated we were trying to limit.
And we did. The buildings we were getting before that were much larger. And that was the intent of that code.
But the intent of the code was actually to keep things at 864 feet.
That's not what the code says. That's not what was adopted.
It says, and if you go back and you look at it, it most certainly talks about that. And there's a lot of conditions that have to be put in place. So, for example, under that code, you don't worry about lot coverage. It depends, because one of the things it talks about is every property is different. Every property is different. So, for example, there could be a property, there was one here a couple weeks ago, that easily could have worked because it was up against an area where it wouldn't have bothered anybody. That same building probably wouldn't fit in other areas. I had no problem with that one. But then there's others that do cause problems. You saw one just a couple weeks ago where the property value is next door, but for some reason the rights have been shifted to the people who want to put these in, because you guys keep recommending them.
We recommend them when they comply with the provisions of the code. And if the planning commission agrees,
but Steve,
then
if
they
you're not
approve
doing impact studies and you haven't been doing them, and I'm not going to argue with you.
Well, you are.
Well, right, because you're trying to tell me you have been and you haven't. And then the flip side of this is, we've also been told part of the reason we had to pass it one night, the driving over the pack and stuff, is because there was this myth that we had to legally pass these things. What nobody understood is in terms of that, well, and I understand that, but that is something that permeated planning, and it's something that permeated the city council.
The planning commission just denied 2 of these that were
Now they have, because there's all kinds of things
before
going
all
on.
of this started. They denied 2.
But if you were to talk to planning commission, what they would have said is, well, we legally have to pass them because we have to have evidence and findings to support our position if we deny.
Well, they're not following.
Anyway, I'm really having trouble with this. I'm really having trouble with these huge buildings. We're literally destroying the lifestyle of the community. I mean, what's happened is the rights of the neighbors are being lost in all of this. And that's a fact. And what's happening is we're driving down the street and we're building these gigantic buildings. And here we are trying to save one of the last agricultural areas, literally, in the Inland Empire. And what's happening is, what happens to these buildings once they go up? It doesn't say you'll tear them down. It says maybe you'll tear them down in the code. It doesn't say that you'll do anything really if all of a sudden they move a business into it. And Steve, what else are they going to move into, most of them? What are they going to do with those? You are the planning director.
I can't go in everybody's backyard and tell them what they're going to do.
And I get that. But what are you supposed to do to protect somebody's neighborhood?
I go by
and that is why in 2010 we were so concerned about the largeness of these buildings. So anyway, this is not over. In my opinion, I have a problem. I have a 5-0 vote by the Planning Commission, and I feel we need to support them. On the other hand, as I went to the property, one of the things I liked about your plan is the fact that you have another one of these buildings nearby that's block and brick, but I'm very concerned that what will a building that's on a hill overlooking somebody's house, what will that do to their property values? What will that do to views? What will that do to them? And I have concerns about that. I realize we're not supposed to care about our neighbors, not you, but that's what I'm feeling like I'm having to defend the intent and purposes of 1845, 1812, and 1813, not the general ones in the one you read. The other ones are very, very, very specific. And the idea is to protect large lots, open space, expansive across properties. Now, if we don't want to do that, if we don't want to follow 18.14, then all that has to happen is we get a 4-1 vote on council. So, for myself, and despite the fact I have reservations, so for example, in order to preserve animal keeping, for me to drive over a paca, because Greg makes a very good point, and I knew it when Greg first said it, and I should have thought about it. Yeah, Greg can drive over an animal keeping area, but he has a whole gigantic place where he keeps his horses. So he still has that area. Part of my concern is you're not going to have that. There's a part of me doesn't even think we need this committee because all the rules are right there. And trust me, I'm going to sit down with the city manager and you, and we're going to go over those rules. And I'm going to sit down with the attorney, and I'm going to find out exactly what we're supposed to be doing. So for me, I'm going to support the Planning Commission. And I'll make a motion that we uphold that, and if there's a second, or if not, it's up to you guys.
Council members Grunmeyer? Hannah? Hoffman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newton?
Yes.
Mayor Bash?
Yes.
Motion carries.
4. All right, moving on to City Council, City Manager, Staff Communications. Berwin? Robin?
No.
Ted?
Just to remind everyone that, and I know most of the people have left, for those that live in the LMD4 next Tuesday, there is the LMD meeting, property owners meeting, to help decide the 440 overreach amount. And for those of you that don't know, I personally put out about 400 door hangers out in the neighborhood along with a couple other property owners. So we'll have almost all 538 homes notified. If, based upon the letter that went out by the LMD director and the postcard that went out, and these door hangers, if they didn't get a notice on it, shame on them. Thank you.
Greg?
Any follow-up with Edison and the telephone poles? I'm starting to see more of them now in my sleep.
Actually, with the assistance of the new Edison liaison, she was able to get me the appropriate person that is at AT&T. So we did have several conversations, and they are working on the schedule to be specific about when they're going to come out and remove all of those existing poles. So I don't have the date yet, but I have the right people, I have the assurances, and they're just working on a schedule with their contractor when that change is going to be. So, but
no guesstimate on what the schedule is
I would
to
not
get
even,
the schedule?
Again, I'm in contact with her as of last. I was contacted, the gentleman from AT&T last week, so he was supposed to get back to me hopefully this week or next with the actual schedule. They were confirming. They're indicated to me that they only recently, within the last 3 weeks, got the notification from Edison that they were done. So now they are working on the schedule. Regardless, I'm confident
Got a warm body.
I'll get a person that has been responsive, and they're trying to get me that information.
Thank you.
We will get you that date certain you want it.
Yeah, Ted.
I'm sorry I got carried away on it. To Andy and Brian, can we get a meeting scheduled either probably around the 1st of January and sometime there regarding the Ingalls Park Master Plan Committee, so we can, with all the updates and the buildings and projects that you have scheduled up there, so that we can put that together? Okay, thank you.
I have just a couple of things. One, I would like to agendize 18.30.46 second units. It's come to my attention that we're over the counter approving second buildings. I would like to discuss that, to clarify that. As I read it, that shouldn't be happening, but in case it is okay, I think we need to look at it. That's the instance where we actually allowed within a half acre to let a building be, as opposed to our zoning laws, have a unit, a house, put right next to another house, and I'd like to agendize that if that's possible.
Council members Grunmeyer? Yes. Hannah?
Yes.
Hoffman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newton? Yes. Mayor Bash?
Yes.
Motion carries.
A part of that report might be there's a proposed legislation, unfortunately, which will impact our ability to exercise the controls we now do.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. It's the over-the-counter thing that I'm having trouble with. We either have zoning laws or we don't. And then second off, Mrs. Briddick's mother passed away, and I would like from council all of us to sign a card sending our condolences to her, if we could do that. And then if there's nothing else, staff? Yeah. Go ahead, Sergeant. Divide.
There is a canine trials on November 5th. Just want to bring that up. That's an opportunity for the handlers and their dogs to participate in a friendly competition to see the strengths and weaknesses of their dogs, and also a great opportunity for the public to come out and see the resources that are available to us and also get to meet the dogs. And that's on the 5th, and there's some flyers out there on the table.
Thank you, sir. Brian?
Just a reminder, town hall meeting the 24th.
Oh, town hall meeting Monday, yes. Yes, town hall meeting. 7 o'clock?
Yes.
6:30.
6:30, excuse me.
Anything else, staff? And then finally, I would like to close this meeting in honor of one of the great people of all time, Pat Cooter, who through the game of softball taught more girls how to be great people through a game than anybody I've ever met. Passed away last week. Pat Cooter was all 100 pounds of her, was just an amazing person. So we can have a moment of silence before I close in the name of Pat Cooter. This meeting is adjourned.